Chapter 93. By the time they landed on the boundary of Mount Yunwu, it was already nighttime. Mo Tiange looked at the familiar scenery and was a bit hesitant, but when she thought of Second Uncle, she straightened her back. Second Uncle was indirectly forced to die by them, and Mount Yunwu had a great hatred for her. How could she be weak and afraid when she had a great hatred? But the strange thing was that after Qin Shi brought her down, no one came to ask about it. The two of them just swaggered into the mountain gate. After walking for a while, Mo Tiange asked in confusion, "Senior Marshal Brother Qin, aren't we going to 10,000 Laws Pavilion?" They weren't going to the South Peak or the North Peak. This path only led to 10,000 Laws Pavilion and had no other destination. Qin Shi didn't deny it and just made a gesture to keep quiet. Mo Tiange didn't say much and followed him. When they arrived at the entrance of 10,000 Laws Pavilion, they used their identity tablets to open the formation and entered the cave. Mo Tiange walked behind Qin Shi. She didn't know what Qin Shi did, but when she entered, she saw that all the disciples guarding 10,000 Laws Pavilion were asleep. Qin Shi led her to the entrance of the cave in the middle. He made several complicated hand seals with his hands and hit the stone door with his spiritual aura. The stone door opened silently. Seeing her surprised expression, Qin Shi smiled. "I was lucky enough to come here with a core formation grandmaster, so I memorized it." He said it casually, but Mo Tiange knew this required eyesight and comprehension. Making hand seals wasn't just a gesture, it also required the corresponding spiritual aura circulation. Because of this, pill recipes were so expensive. Concocting some medicinal pills required specific hand seals, and people had to slowly figure them out to be able to use them freely. She knew she didn't have this kind of ability. After seeing it once, she only remembered a little bit and had no clue about the circulation of spiritual aura. This was also the reason why she didn't dabble in pill concocting or tool refining and wasn't familiar with hand seals. Qin Shi took a talisman and handed it to her. "Put an invisibility talisman on it to avoid triggering the restriction." Mo Tiange took it, feeling a bit complicated. Invisibility talismans were priceless. She only had one, and Second Uncle only managed to find it after searching for a long time. It was much more precious than many high-level talismans. She had seen the talisman paper used to draw this talisman before, so she was sure Qin Shi drew it himself. It had only been 2 years since Qin Shi started learning how to draw talismans. In just 2 short years, he was actually able to draw invisibility talismans. Mo Tiange realized that she definitely didn't have this kind of talent, so she couldn't help but feel dispirited. There were too many people who were more talented than her. It really wasn't easy for her to have some achievements. This cave was slightly smaller than the ones aura refining disciples could enter, and there weren't many things inside. Most of them were grotesquely shaped objects. On the contrary, there weren't many jade slips, and there was only one bookshelf filled with books. Furthermore, there was also a restriction placed on top of it. Mo Tiange was apprehensive about these restrictions, so she just looked at them and didn't dare to make a move. Qin Shi, on the other hand, didn't care at all. He rummaged around and threw whatever he liked into his chinkuan bag. Unexpectedly, none of the restrictions were triggered. Upon seeing his behavior, Mo Tiange felt it was absurd. Did this senior marshal brother Qin sneak into Yunwu's sect just to be a robber? Before long, Qin Shi stopped. Aside from the things he put away, there were still several things in his hand. He directly threw them to her and said, "This place is only accessible to core formation cultivators and above. These things might be useful to you, so take them." Mo Tiange took them and silently put them into her chinkuan bag. In any case, this was his good intention, so there was no need for her to refuse. After erasing all kinds of traces, the two of them quietly left 10,000 Laws Pavilion. As for those disciples guarding 10,000 Laws Pavilion, they were in a trance for a moment. They never expected that while they were in a trance, the library cave that could only be opened by core formation cultivators in the sect was stolen. Without mentioning these disciples guarding the cave, Qin Shi took Mo Tiange and continued to walk on the unknown path. Mo Tiange only knew this path led to the North Peak. However, judging from Qin Shi's familiar appearance, he should have taken this path often. After walking for a while, the two of them finally entered the North Peak. Facing the North Peak's formation within a formation, Qin Shi only took out an identity tablet and safely led her inside. After several turns, when a building finally appeared in front of them, Mo Tiange couldn't tell north from south anymore. Qin Shi still quietly broke the restriction and led her into a garden. Once they entered, their nostrils were filled with the fragrance of medicinal herbs and their bodies were overflowing with spiritual aura. As it turned out, this place was actually a medicinal garden. Qin Shi still asked her to stand on the side, but this time, he didn't look around. Instead, he picked several spiritual fruits or spiritual plants with a specific target before he took her out of this medicinal garden. Mo Tiange finally understood. This senior martial brother Qin was simply here to steal something in passing. He wasn't familiar with 10,000 Laws Pavilion, but he was familiar with this medicinal garden. Several years ago, he received the appreciation of a foundation building cultivator in the North Peak and got a job in the concocting room. He must have taken a liking to these spiritual plants long ago and seized the opportunity to steal them. This made her very speechless. The image of the cold but gentlemanly senior martial brother Qin had completely collapsed. After picking the spiritual plants, Mo Tiange silently followed him and continued walking, wondering which unlucky places he had taken a liking to. A quarter of an hour later, she was dumbfounded. Although she was mentally prepared, she still didn't expect that the next place would be Guiyuan Hall. What kind of place was Guiyuan Hall? It was the residence of Yunwu sect head. Every generation of sect heads lived in Guiyuan Hall when they were in power. The last sect head, Fang Dingyue, was killed in Zixia sect, so branch master Jiang lived here now. She never expected Qin Shi would be so bold. Now, she could only brace herself and quietly follow him into Guiyuan Hall. Inside Guiyuan Hall, there were restrictions everywhere. She didn't know how he did it, but as they walked, these restrictions seemed to exist in name only. They weren't triggered at all. Moreover, they weren't discovered by the disciples guarding the hall. She knew Qin Shi must have done something, but these methods were usually secret techniques, so she didn't ask him about it. The two of them walked back and forth in Guiyuan Hall, avoiding several groups of disciples guarding the hall. In the end, they unexpectedly entered a stone passage through a restriction. Even if Mo Tiange didn't know much about Guiyuan Hall, she knew this kind of protection was definitely an important place. However, she didn't think about it anymore. Although Qin Shi was bold and reckless, he was also capable. She couldn't see what kind of restriction it was, but it was easily solved by him. The stone passage behind the restriction was winding for an unknown length. The two of them walked for a long time, but they still didn't reach the end. Occasionally, they came across one or two stone rooms with some treasures inside, but Qin Shi didn't even spare them a glance. Mo Tiange suddenly realized that he must be going for a certain treasure. These things weren't his goal. After walking for a while, they finally arrived in front of a stone room. Qin Shi suddenly raised his hand to stop her. Then he took out a peach branch from his chinkuan bag. The green leaves on the peach branch looked like they were new, and the peach blossoms looked like they had just been plucked from the tree. He muttered a few words then waved his hand. The peach branch stood on the ground, emitting a burst of fragrance. Then, a barrier slowly appeared around the two of them. Senior martial brother Qin? Mo Tiange called out in a low voice. Qin Shi just raised his index finger, signaling her not to speak. The two of them stood in the passageway of the stone room for a while. Then Mo Tiange heard voices coming from the stone room. Senior martial brother Lin, what do you think of this 9 dragons cauldron? This voice. It's branch master Jiang. Mo Tiange raised her head to look at Qin Shi, hoping he could explain what he was doing. Branch master Jiang was here, and there seemed to be another core formation cultivator. Were they courting death by squatting here? However, Qin Shi just shook his head at her without saying anything. After a moment of silence, they heard another voice. This person said bluntly, "What do you want?" Branch Master Jiang let out a hollow laugh and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Lin, you're now the branch master of Jindao School, and I'm the master of Mount Yunwu. We're in the same situation, so we should be more intimate." The other person snorted. This old Taoist doesn't dare to be mentioned in the same breath as Branch Master Jiang. You're the great hero of Zixia sect's merging with Mount Yunwu. I, Lin, am just an old Taoist who doesn't know how many years I have left to live. I'm afraid I'll shorten my lifespan if I get too close to you. His words were sarcastic. Mo Tiange felt that this voice and attitude seemed a bit familiar. Right, wasn't the Taoist who led Jindao School's team during the foundation building pill trial the branch master of Jindao School? Mo Tiange also heard some gossip about this matter later. This Taoist Lin was the former head of Jindao School. Later, when his lifespan was about to end, he passed on the position of head to school head Jin. Unexpectedly, Jindao School suffered a great disaster due to the change in Zixia sect, and school head Jin and several core formation cultivators died. Jindao School was really weak and couldn't compete with Zixia sect, so the former head could only plead with Zixia sect. Jindao School voluntarily joined Zixia sect and asked them to stop the purge. Later, Zixia sect felt that his reputation was high enough and his lifespan was about to end. Since he could buy people's hearts and wasn't afraid of any mishaps, Zixia sect appointed him as the branch master of Jindao School. This retired former sect head could only stand in front of the storm again. This branch master Lin only became the branch master appointed by Zixia sect for the sake of the other disciples of Jindao School, so he naturally looked down on branch master Jiang, who relied on Zixia sect and betrayed Yunwu sect. His words were also extremely harsh. However, because of his extremely high reputation, even Zixia sect respected him very much, so branch master Jiang didn't dare to offend him. At this point, they obviously didn't see eye to eye. Sure enough, branch master Jiang only chuckled then changed the topic. I won't hide it from Senior Marshal Brother Lin. Junior Marshal Brother has encountered a difficult matter and wants to ask Senior Marshal Brother Lin to help me. Branch master Lin didn't seem surprised at all. Is it about that great-grandson of yours who had ill intentions towards a female disciple of your school and lost his life? Yes, the person who killed my great-grandson was unfortunately rescued by someone. That person was. When she heard this, Mo Tiange suddenly felt her head go numb and her body went limp. She gently propped her up against the stone wall and heard Branch Master Lin's voice coming from inside the stone room. Branch Master Jiang, I can't accept this 9 dragons cauldron of yours. Branch Master Jiang hastily said, Senior Marshal Brother Lin, I'm not asking you to kill that person. I just want you to trap him so I can have a chance to take revenge. Branch Master Lin only snorted coldly. There's no need to mention this matter again. Even if I have that ability, I won't do it. Do you think I don't know that there's a nascent soul cultivator behind this person? Senior Marshal Brother Lin, Xianqing School is thousands of miles away, Branch Master Jiang. Branch Master Lin suddenly shouted fiercely, you should take revenge on your own. Do you want to bring calamity upon my Jindao School? I can't accept this 9 dragons cauldron. We don't see eye to eye, so let's call it a day. There's no need to see us off. Not long after he finished speaking, the stone room's door was suddenly opened. An old Taoist angrily walked out, followed by Branch Master Jiang. He was angry but didn't dare to turn hostile. The two of them left as if they couldn't see Qin Shi and Mo Tiange, who were stuck against the stone wall. However, before Branch Master Lin left, he seemed to cast a glance in their direction. After a while, Branch Master Jiang turned around with an angry expression on his face. However, when he stepped into the stone room, he discovered that a young man was already standing inside. With an aghast expression, he immediately took out his magic weapon and shouted, Who are you? The young man showed a faint smile but didn't answer. He leisurely took out a sword from his chinkuan bag and unsheathed it. The sword was completely golden, and flames were dancing on its blade. Its momentum was astonishing. 3 Young Real Fire Sword. Your Chapter 94. When she woke up, Mo Tienga was a bit confused. She slowly recalled what happened before she fainted and jumped up in shock, looking around nervously. This seemed to be a room in an inn. The furniture was simple, the floor was gray, and the quilt had a slightly moldy smell. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you're awake? Mo Tienga turned her head and looked in the direction of the voice. Qin Shi was sitting at the table in the outer room. He seemed to be drawing talismans with his back to her and didn't look back. Seeing this scene, she felt a bit relieved. Qin Shi looked so relaxed, which meant they should be fine. However, she was a bit confused. Senior Marshal Brother Qin, were we discovered? Qin Shi put down the brush, burned the broken talisman paper, and answered, no, I knocked you out. Huh? She was even more confused. He didn't explain. He put away the paper and brush on the table and said, since you're awake, let's go in a bit. Mo Tienga nodded in bewilderment. She thought that since he was able to escape from 2 core formation cultivators, he probably used some kind of secret technique, so it wasn't convenient for him to tell her. However, she always felt that Qin Shi was very strange. He could always do things she thought were basically impossible, but his attitude was too calm. It made her want to doubt him, but she also felt that she was being too paranoid. Maybe it's because he has a high-level cultivator elder, so he has too many treasures. Oh, right. Qin Shi took out several things from his Qinkuan bag and threw them to her. I got these yesterday. Take them. Mo Tienga took them. They were soft armor and a jade ruler. These are the heaven and earth cloud silk armor and the land fleeing ruler. The former is a defensive item. When worn, it can withstand several attacks from cultivators in the same realm. As for the land fleeing ruler, it's a good thing. If you use it to escape, you'll be hundreds of miles away. Mo Tienga was shocked. She knew how precious these 2 things were. Although they weren't magic weapons, they weren't far off. Why are you giving them to me? Qin Shi said, I don't need them, but I thought it would be a waste not to take them, so of course I'm giving them to you. But, before she could say anything, Qin Shi interrupted her. No buts. You're usually very straightforward. Why are you acting like a little girl now? Wasn't it because he knew her gender and didn't want to owe her a favor? However, she couldn't say this out loud. Otherwise, she would offend Qin Shi. He had saved her when she was in danger, so it could be said that she owed him a favor. She still wanted to keep some distance, but if he knew, he would think that she didn't know what was good for her. Alright, I won't say anything unnecessary. Anyway, I owe you too much, 1 more won't make a difference, Qin Shi smiled. This is how Junior Marshal Brother Yi should be. Oh, I'll go out first. You can tidy up a bit and come out when you're done. Okay, got it. A moment later, the 2 of them walked out of the inn. Mo Tienga discovered that they were still at the foot of Mount Yunwu. She thought to herself that this senior marshal brother Qin really came from a prestigious family, and his courage was too big. Before he left, he turned around to look at Mount Yunwu. The north and south peaks towered into the clouds and were surrounded by lingering spiritual aura. Once upon a time, this was the place she had strived to enter, but now, she was desperately trying to escape. Junior Brother Yi, is there anything you can't let go of? Mo Tienga was silent for a while then shook her head. It's not that I can't let go. I just want to remember those people I know. Unfortunately, it's not convenient to see them right now. Qin Shi said, don't worry. Although Senior Marshal Brother Lu hasn't built his foundation yet, he's received the favor of a senior from the sect, so his future is bright. I heard that Junior Marshal Sister Murong's cultivation is also going very smoothly. She has the support of her clan, so presumably, she also has a high chance of building her foundation. Is that so? She murmured, but then she remembered Jiang Shanghang and wondered whether he had escaped or not. Forget it, forget it. Right now, she couldn't even take care of herself, so let's just leave it to fate. If we're fated, we'll definitely meet again in the future. Senior Marshal Brother Qin, let's go. Several days later, two people landed in the small market square of Huanshandok. They were Mo Tiange and Qin Shi. Huanshandok was located northeast of Mount Yunwu, so it wasn't on the way. However, Mo Tiange wanted to deal with some matters, so Qin Shi agreed, so the two of them took a detour to this place. The two of them first went to the small shop Tianxiao opened. Sure enough, the door was closed. Just as Mo Tiange was about to push the door open, a person walked out of the small shop next door and shouted, "Master Immortal, you can't enter." Mo Tiange turned around. It was a mortal dressed as a shop assistant. She frowned and asked, "Why?" The shop assistant hastily saluted them and said with a respectful expression, "Master Immortal, it's not that this lowly one doesn't want to let you in. It's that our market square steward's hall has sealed this shop." Sealed? What did that mean? The shop assistant observed her expression and answered, "Yes. Master Immortal, you're not from here, right? Something happened to this shop, so it's been taken away by the steward's hall. It hasn't been rented out yet, so it's empty." "Oh." Mo Tiange frowned and asked, "What about the original owner of this shop?" Upon hearing her question, the shop assistant sighed and said, "To tell you the truth, the husband and wife who originally opened this shop are both dead." Mo Tiange already knew about this, so she just asked, "What about their corpses?" Her question was too direct, so the shop assistant was full of questions, but he didn't dare to say anything. He answered, "This lowly one doesn't know. I only know it was handled by the steward's hall." "Where's the steward's hall?" "Oh, you can go straight from here. You'll find the biggest room." Mo Tiange nodded, then took out a piece of gold and threw it to the shop assistant. The shop assistant only came out to answer a few questions, but he unexpectedly received such a big piece of gold. He immediately beamed with joy and repeatedly said, "Thank you, Master Immortal. Thank you, Master Immortal." The two of them turned around and walked for a short distance before they successfully found the steward's hall. "Fellow Taoists, is there something you need?" There was only a second layer aura refining cultivator guarding the steward's hall. He was drinking wine while asking them questions. His attitude was extremely impatient. Mo Tiange frowned when she sensed the smell of alcohol coming from the man's body. "Is this the steward's hall?" The cultivator burped and looked at them from the corner of his eyes. However, he didn't correct his attitude because of their cultivation levels. He pointed the wine bottle outside the door with his hand and said with his eyes closed, "If you don't know, then come back after you've seen clearly." Mo Tiange was a bit annoyed, but she was still patient. Just as she was about to ask, Qin Shi took a step forward, threw a handful of spirit stones on the table and said coldly, "We have something to ask you." Upon seeing the spirit stones on the table, the man's eyes immediately lit up. When he finished speaking, his attitude immediately changed. Not only did he put down the wine bottle, but he also stood up and politely saluted them. "What do you want to ask?" "I'll definitely tell you everything I know." Mo Tiange was speechless upon seeing this man's completely different attitude. This manager's market square's eyes were really opened only when he saw money. He clearly knew their cultivation levels were much higher than his, but he was indifferent to them. Now that he saw money, he immediately became polite. Mo Tiange directly asked, "A few days ago, a husband and wife died in your market square. May I ask where their bodies are?" Upon hearing her question, the man pondered for a moment, then answered, "Fellow Taoist, you're talking about the one surnamed Meng, right?" Mo Tiange nodded. "Yes." "How did you deal with their funeral?" "About that." The man raised his eyes and carefully sized her up. "May I ask how fellow Taoist is related to them?" "Relatives." Upon hearing Mo Tiange's answer, the man cast a somewhat guilty glance at her and said, "Fellow Taoist, we never heard that brats surnamed Meng had any relatives." Mo Tiange frowned and said bluntly, "Sir, you only need to tell us where their bodies are." The cultivator looked at the spirit stones on the table, then finally answered, "Fellow Taoist, we really didn't know they had relatives, so we burned them according to our usual practice and buried their ashes in the back of the mountain, Mo Tianga's heart sank. So you're saying the bodies are gone? Not really. Upon seeing her cold expression, the man answered honestly, you can still find them if you want, but they're all buried in the ground, so you can't tell which part is the soil and which part is the ashes. Fellow Taoist? Mo Tianga took a deep breath, then turned around and walked away. She didn't want to stay here any longer and think about killing this man with her sword. Qin Shi caught up to her and called out, Junior Martial Brother Yi. Mo Tianga paused for a moment to calm her anger. She just wanted to deal with Tianxiao's funeral and bring her husband's ashes back to Mo family's village if she had a chance in the future. Junior Martial Brother Yi, who are you looking for in the end? Mo Tianga was silent for a while, then answered, my cousin. We grew up together when we were kids and she took care of me the most. Oh. You seem to have known about them. Mo Tianga smiled bitterly. Of course I knew. They were implicated by me. Implicated? Mo Tianga nodded and lowered her head with a gloomy expression. If she hadn't taken the pill recipe for the constitution-enhancing pill, Jiang Qingxian wouldn't have noticed her. If she hadn't been too careless and was discovered in Hu Clan, Jiang Qingxian wouldn't have recognized her and Tianxiao wouldn't have had her soul searched. It was all because of her that Tianxiao lost her life. Upon seeing her expression, Qin Shi didn't ask again. Instead, he sighed and said, do you feel very guilty? Upon hearing this question, Mo Tianga was at a loss for a while before she finally nodded and said softly, yes. If they hadn't run into me, they would be fine. If you found their ashes, would you feel better? After people die, where their ashes are buried is the same, right? Even if there's a tombstone, it'll only comfort the living. Even if you brought their ashes back, what difference would it make to them? Mo Tianga was speechless. Qin Shi looked at her and said faintly, don't forget, you're a cultivator. Although his voice was flat and didn't contain the slightest hint of blame, Mo Tianga understood the warning in his words. Cultivators shouldn't be restricted by external objects and shouldn't be obsessed with formality. If they couldn't even see through this, how could they talk about cultivating? Cultivators cultivated their hearts. If they couldn't even get past external objects, how could they advance their cultivation level? She understood all these principles, but, when we were in Yunwu sect, I originally thought you were a free and easy person who was very firm on the path of cultivation. But now I know you can't even see through one's state of mind. Junior Martial Brother Yi, you have to know that if you continue like this, you can only build your foundation at most. As for forming your gold core, you won't have any hope. Mo Tianga's heart trembled. Right, second uncle just passed away. How could I make a mistake again? Some things have already happened. Guilt and regret are useless. She closed her eyes and said sincerely, Senior Martial Brother Qin, thank you. Chapter 95. Standing on the flying sword, Mo Tianga looked down at the ground. The mountain peaks gathered together, the clouds billowed furiously, and the mountains stood towering. This was West Kunwa's Mount Taikang, the main gate of Xianqing School. If she hadn't been to Tiandao's sect and seen Mount Yuheng and Demonic Mountain, she would have been shocked by the scenery under her feet. Compared to such a lofty and rich spiritual aura, Mount Yunwu was simply not worth mentioning. Even Zixia sect, which she once exclaimed in admiration, now seemed to be petty. Mount Taikang was several thousand feet high. Although it wasn't as high as Demonic Mountain, it was one of the rarest peaks she'd seen along the way. Its main peak was the highest, and it was surrounded by 6 other peaks of similar height. Countless roof tiles and eaves were hidden in the forest, and there were also hundreds of disciples neatly lined up in the square, learning martial arts. Upon noticing the direction in which she was staring, Qin Shi explained, although Xianqing School is a Dao school, we also have many kinds of cultivation techniques. These disciples are from sword cultivation groups and are sword cultivators, so they learn martial arts just like the secular world. Oh. It looks really spectacular. Looking from a distance, these cultivators in blue and white robes brandished their swords together. The sword aura was really crisscrossing, elegant and pleasing to the eye. Sensing someone approaching, she looked up and saw a group of 7 or 8 cultivators coming on their swords. The leader was a foundation-building cultivator who seemed to be in charge of mountain patrol. Upon seeing them, the group of cultivators flew over but only saluted Qin Shi from afar. After they left, Qin Shi said, "All right, from now on, you're a disciple of Enchanting school. I'll take you in now. Let's go." The flying sword went down towards one of the peaks. This is Clear Spring Peak. Enchanting school has 6 peaks. The disciples of each peak usually cultivate on the side peaks and go to the main peak to listen to Tao. You only need to memorize the general terrain of Clear Spring Peak. We only go to the main peak occasionally. After Qin Shi finished speaking, the 2 of them landed in front of a main hall. She was still looking around when a female cultivator came out of the main hall. As soon as she saw them, she looked pleasantly surprised and was about to call out, "Fengshui, come here." The female cultivator swallowed the words she was about to say back into her stomach. Full of questions, she walked over and bowed. Qin Shi first said to Mo Tiange, "This is our Clear Spring Peak supervising disciple and also Martial Uncle Xuanin's inner disciple, Luo Fengshui." Right after he said that, he said to Luo Fengshui, "It's been 3 years, but you still haven't built your foundation?" Upon seeing his expression, Luo Fengshui blinked her eyes, then very cleverly called out, "Martial uncle?" Qin Shi showed a faint smile and said, "Yes, now you have to call me martial uncle." "Oh." Luo Fengshui's eyes wandered back and forth. She then said with a smile, "Martial uncle, why did it take you so long to come back? Grandmaster misses you very much." Qin Shi didn't answer. Instead, he pointed at Mo Tiange and said, "This is the junior martial sister who just entered the school. Take her to the register first. Later, we'll make arrangements." "Oh, I see." Luo Fengshui looked at Mo Tiange with doubt on her face. In the end, she just smiled and said, "Junior martial sister, what's your name?" This was the first time someone called her junior martial sister, and Luo Fengshui happened to be wearing men's clothes. For a moment, Mo Tiange didn't know how to greet her. In the end, she could only answer first. "Senior martial sister Luo, my name is Mo Tiange." "Tiange?" Luo Fengshui called her name. She immediately pulled Mo Tiange's hand affectionately and said, "Don't call me senior martial sister. Everyone calls me by my name. You can also call me Fengshui." This, seeing that Mo Tiange was completely at a loss when faced with Luo Fengshui's enthusiasm, Qin Shi couldn't help but smile. He said, "Junior martial brother Yi, I'll report your matter to Grandmaster first. You can go with Fengshui." He then said to Luo Fengshui, "Fengshui, I'll leave her to you. You have to do your job well." Luo Fengshui smiled and said playfully, "I know. Martial uncle, you haven't come back for a long time. You should go and pay your respects to Grandmaster first. I'll take good care of her." Facing the lively Luo Fengshui, Qin Shi seemed to be somewhat helpless. Without saying anything, he waved his hand and left. Mo Tiange watched as his figure disappeared. He didn't say anything else to her and didn't look at her again. Mo Tiange's mood was a bit complicated. The journey from Mount Yunwu to Enchanting School was almost across the entire Kunwu mountain range. They walked for 2 whole months. During these 2 months, the 2 of them had become many times closer. Perhaps it was because Qin Shi had been taught by a famous teacher since he was a child, but his knowledge was extensive. Not only did he tell her a lot of cultivation insights, but he also talked about a lot of things he had seen. In fact, his temperament wasn't as cold as it was when they first met. On the contrary, he was gentle and polite. When he talked, he made people feel like they were bathing in a spring breeze. Moreover, he helped her a lot. When she realized that she was starting to rely on him, she realized that the situation wasn't good. She made a prompt decision and distanced herself from him. Qin Shi came from a prestigious school and he also had a high-level elder. Even if they performed dual cultivation together, with her aptitude, she definitely wouldn't have any hope, so why should she be delusional? Therefore, when she realized that she was a bit moved, she rationally cut it off. This was the first time she developed a different kind of feeling towards a person. Even she herself was surprised that she could make such a rational decision. However, she didn't feel like she was struggling because she never had such firm confidence that she would go further on the path of cultivation. She approached the highest immortal's cave on Clear Spring Peak. Although it was called an immortal's cave, it would be better to call it a palace. Although it was located in the belly of the mountain, the entrance was completely palace-like. When the disciple guarding the entrance saw him, he called out in surprise, "Martial Uncle Shojing, you're back." He nodded and asked, "Is Grandmaster here?" The disciple answered, "He's here. Please come in." After stepping through the entrance, they saw that the ground inside was paved with spirit jades and the walls were made of strange stones. Although it wasn't dazzling with gold and jade, it had an indescribable air of nobility. Inside the main hall, a middle-aged man wearing a golden crown and a king's robe was reclining on a dragon-carved bed. A woman was massaging his legs while another woman was peeling grapes for him. This middle-aged man who looked like a secular emperor was actually a nascent soul cultivator. After he swallowed the grapes the beauty brought to his mouth, he finally took the time to look at Qin. "Where did you go this time? You actually didn't come back for 3 years. Huh? You recovered your cultivation level?" Qin ignored the man's behavior, which was like that of a secular and capable emperor. He picked up a chair, sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. "What else could I have done? Of course, I was looking for spiritual medicines to treat injuries. I also took the opportunity to look for some body-refining techniques in preparation for my nascent soul formation." "Humph." The man raised his eyebrows. "That's more than that, right? You obviously brought back a little girl. What, are you finally tempted by her? Do you think I'm like you?" Qin said bluntly. He then frowned and said, "How did you know she was a woman?" "She clearly. Do you think you can hide from my eyes that have seen countless women just by wearing men's clothes?" "Oh, no, it's my divine sense." After talking to himself for a while, the man swallowed another grape and comfortably changed his posture. He stared at Qin and said, "Tell me, since you brought her back, she's definitely not an ordinary woman. What's going on?" Qin didn't argue with him anymore. He thought for a while and said, "Master, if Mo Tiange heard the way he addressed her, she would definitely understand his real identity." Clear Spring Peak was Patriarch Jinghe's cultivation place. Since this middle-aged man was a nascent soul cultivator, he was naturally Qin Jinghe. There were only a few people in the entire Xianqing school who could call him master. "Master, please accept her as our disciple." Qin Jinghe, who was eating grapes, almost choked when he heard what Mo Tiange said. He swallowed the grape in his mouth, thought for a while, then waved the 2 women away and finally sat up straight. "You want me to accept her as my disciple? Who's this woman? She's actually worthy of your attention?" Qin didn't answer the latter question. He only said, "I just want you to accept her as your registered disciple. I'll take care of everything else. Tell me who she is first." Qin had no choice but to tell him, "Do you remember someone entrusted an orphan to me 20 years ago?" Qin Jinghe, who didn't look like a nascent soul cultivator at all but more like a fatuous and mediocre monarch in the secular world, thought for a while and understood. "Oh, so she's that family's girl. Alas, I'm really disappointed. I thought you were enlightened." He then lay back down, but this time, he didn't have a beauty to serve him, so he used a spell to peel the grape. Seeing his behavior, Qin felt even more helpless. "Master?" The man said discontentedly, I'm your granduncle and also your master. Can't you be a bit more respectful? Can you blame me for being disrespectful?" Qin wasn't polite at all. "Look at yourself. Do you look like an elder?" "You brat," the man jumped up. "You're obviously taught by me, so why are you acting like those smelly old Taoists? Who said that cultivators have to be pure in heart and few in desires? Only by wholeheartedly cultivating can one achieve success. Didn't I, your master, cultivate to the middle stage of the nascent soul realm? I'm just talking about acting like an elder. I didn't. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Smelly brat, you just came back, but you're already making me angry. She was about to explain, but he was retorted. He could only take back what he wanted to say and spread his hands. Fine, whatever you say. Who told you to be an elder? In any case, he was already used to it. That's more like it. He continued to eat grapes with satisfaction. After a while, Qingjing has said, tell me your plan first. I remember the disciple you sent 10 years ago brought back news saying this girl really has a pure Yin constitution. She nodded. Correct. In fact, her spiritual roots aren't good, but she's very diligent and has a good perception. With some nurturing, she might be able to become useful. Become useful? Are you talking about the core formation realm? Qin Jinghe shook his head. Don't use your example on other people. Brat, you have double spiritual roots, so you won't be burdened by your aptitude. I remember that child has 5 spiritual roots, right? For a cultivator with 5 spiritual roots, no matter how diligent she is and how good her perception is, it'll be very difficult for her to achieve anything. If she can build her foundation, she'll already be thanking the gods. She didn't refute him. Master, since you think so, how about we make a bet? You said she can build her foundation at most, but I said she can definitely form her gold core. Qin Jinghe, who was sitting on the bed, stopped and looked at him thoughtfully. Where do you get your confidence from? Not to mention a cultivator with 5 spiritual roots, there are many cultivators with double spiritual roots like you who are stuck in the foundation building realm. You said she can definitely build her foundation. Did you discover something? Shi shook his head and only said one word, intuition. Qin Jinghe paused and curled his lips disdainfully. Forget it. Don't forget, no matter how awesome you are, you're only in the middle stage of the core formation realm. How can you compare to me in sensing the mandate of heaven? Shi sneered at him. Master, are you really that awesome? I remember you said it would take me 200 years to advance to the core formation realm. What happened in the end? It only took me 70 years to form my gold core. I'm afraid I'll form my nascent soul in 200 years. Qin Jinghe's face reddened, but in the next second, he said confidently, there are errors in sensing the mandate of heaven, okay? Don't be complacent. Forming your nascent soul in 200 years? How many years has it been since someone appeared in the celestial pole? I'm telling you, don't think forming your nascent soul is as easy as forming your gold core. Back then, I was already a genius, but I only formed my nascent soul when I was almost 400 years old. Then master, you're betting she can't form her gold core? The topic changed too fast, so Qin Jinghe paused for a moment and said angrily, who said I was betting with you? Brat, go away. You're always scheming against me. Wait. I want to ask you what you want to do with her, not discuss her future with you. Don't change the topic. Chapter 96. Tienge, are you, the disciple martial uncle accepted from outside? Mo Tienge swore that Luo Fengshui didn't have good intentions when she asked her this question. However, Luo Fengshui's bad intentions were too open, so she didn't seem malicious at all. Instead, it seemed like she was just playing around with friends. Mo Tienge didn't know what to do. Ever since she was a child, she only had a little girl's friendship with Tianxiao. Apart from her, she had never had a close friend. But Luo Fengshui was really too enthusiastic and acted too friendly. They just met, but she was already so intimate. Even Murong Yen wasn't like this when she first met her. Senior Marshal Sister Luo, I told you not to call me Senior Marshal Sister Luo. Just call me Fengshui. But those disciples just now all called me that, because I'm not familiar with them. I'm not familiar with you either, okay? Mo Tienge swallowed her words in time. Luo Fengxue approached her again with a curious expression on her face. I seem to have heard Martial Uncle call you Junior Martial Brother Yi just now. What's going on? How was he supposed to explain the connection between these two things to others? But facing Luo Fengxue's curious and harmless expression, she couldn't refuse. Because Senior Martial Brother Qin, ah! Luo Fengxue screamed, startling Mo Tiange so much that she almost dropped the sect identity tablet she just received. Luo Fengxue grabbed her and shouted, Senior Martial Brother Qin. Her voice was so loud that the people passing by all turned to look at her. Luo Fengxue pulled her to a corner and whispered, Did Martial Uncle go to some cultivation group? Mo Tiange nodded. Seeing Luo Fengxue's reaction, she carefully worded her words. I was originally in East Kunwu. I entered a cultivation group through the Immortals Assembly and met Senior Martial Brother Qin there. Oh. Luo Fengxue calmed down a bit and asked again, Martial Uncle called you Junior Martial Brother. Have you been pretending to be a man? And there was nothing to hide. In Xianqing School, there was Master Daoist Shoujing who knew most of her secrets and Qin Shi who heard about her experiences. These things would be known sooner or later. Luo Fengxue thought about it and temporarily accepted this explanation. Then, why did Martial Uncle bring you back? Because. Senior Sister Luo, it's a bit complicated. Can we talk about it later? Luo Fengxue was stunned. Once she saw Mo Tiange's expression, she chuckled and said, I almost forgot. You came from afar, so I should let you rest after you finished your business. We're done with the registration. Let's go get some clothes and ask where you'll be staying. Let's go. Mo Tiange secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She really would not associate with such an overly enthusiastic person, and she felt that there was something wrong with this. However, although this senior sister Luo was a bit naggy, she was quite capable. Following behind her, the matter of entering the sect was handled properly. It was no wonder that she could become a deacon disciple. These are your clothes. We aura refining disciples must wear it. However, aren't you going to build your foundation soon? After reaching the foundation establishment realm, one could receive a new design or make their own, as long as the sect's totem was embroidered on it. Of course, if you form your gold core one day, you can wear whatever you want. Mo Tiange took the clothes and listened to Luo Fengxue's endless chatter. Xianqing School was an orthodox Dao school, so the sect's clothes were naturally Daoist robes. The white robes and blue coats were very simple and tidy. However, she didn't know what kind of material it was made of. It felt soft and smooth, but it was also very tough and had a faint spiritual aura. Compared to Yunwu sect's black robes, it looked more like a spirit tool. Our Xianqing School's Daoist robes are woven from Mount Taikang's unique cloud brocade. After being burned by innate true fire, wearing it is very beneficial in fights of magical powers, so it can also be considered a spirit tool. Sure enough. Mo Tiange stroked the robes and sighed. It's really unusual. Luo Fengxue smiled and said, This isn't unique to our Xianqing School. Tiandao sect, Gujian sect, and Biyun sect also do this. Luo Fengxue didn't think it was strange, but Mo Tiange knew it was. Sure enough, this was the work of a big cultivation group. Not only was the Mountain Gate spirit vein excellent, but the sect's strength could also be seen from its small details. Every disciple had several sets of clothes and had to change them frequently. There were at least several thousand disciples in the sect, and all of them were refined into spirit tools. How could ordinary cultivation groups afford this? After they finished collecting their belongings, Luo Fengxue was just about to take Mo Tiange to ask about her living arrangements when someone came to send her a message. Fengxue, Martial Uncle Xianin wants you to go and take your new junior martial sister. The person who came to pass the message was a 17 or 18-year-old youngster. Sure enough, he directly called her by her name. Got it. Luo Fengxue turned around and said, It seems Martial Uncle has already reported to Grandmaster and decided how to arrange you. Let's go. Mo Tiange answered, feeling a bit nervous. Seeing her like this, Luo Fengxue comforted her. Don't worry. My master is Grandmaster's #1 disciple now. If he wants to see you, he obviously values you very much. At the very least, he'll let you become an inner disciple. What she said made sense. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then asked, Senior Martial Sister Luo, is Master Daoist Shoujing also at Clear Spring Peak? Luo Fengshue's expression became a bit strange when she asked this question, but she soon smiled and said, of course. Martial Uncle Shoujing is Grandmaster's blood-related junior and also a direct disciple, so he's naturally at Clear Spring Peak. Why do you want to know this? Mo Tiange said, Senior Martial Brother Qin can take me to Xianqing School because my late father has some relationship with Master Daoist Shoujing. Oh, I see. Luo Fengxue rolled her eyes and said, however, you might not be able to see Martial Uncle Shoujing right now. There are so many martial uncles in Clear Spring Peak, but Martial Uncle Shoujing is the most hard-working in his cultivation. He rarely even comes out to give sermons. If he's not in closed-door meditation, he's wandering outside. Oh, no, he's traveling. Even advanced inner disciples of core formation elders like us have a hard time meeting him. Mo Tiange wasn't disappointed. She said, it's good enough that he accepted me into Xianqing School. Whether I can see him or not isn't important. Thank you for telling me, Senior Martial Sister Luo. You're too polite. I already told you to call me Fengxue. Seeing that Luo Fengxue was trying to curry favor with her, Mo Tiange hastily said, Senior Martial Sister Luo, why do the core formation grandmasters in the school only call each other by their first names and not their surnames? Luo Fengxue was puzzled for a moment before she finally understood. She explained with a smile, that's not it. Xianqing School is an orthodox Dao school, so we naturally have to follow Dao school rules. Aura refining disciples and foundation building disciples don't have titles before they succeed in their cultivation. However, once they form their gold cores, the school will grant them a Daoist name. In the future, they'll be called by their Daoist name. Only people close to them can call them by their real names. For example, my master's Daoist name is Xianin. His original surname is Ma, so people call him Ma Xianin. As for his real name, no one knows for a long time. I see, also, core formation cultivators are called Master Daoist, but if they advance into the nascent soul realm, they'll be called Lord Daoist. My master's name in the outside world is Master Daoist Xianin, while my grandmaster is Lord Daoist Jinghe. Mo Tiange had never heard of such a form of address before, so she asked, if I form my gold core one day, won't I still be called Mo Tiange? A hint of amazement flashed in Luo Fengshue's eyes. She smiled and said, if you form your gold core, the elders in the school will grant you a Daoist name. From then on, the disciples in the school will call you by your Daoist name. However, Tiange, since you're really confident, you must be extraordinarily talented, right? Mo Tiange shook her head. It's just an example. I haven't built my foundation yet, so how could I form my gold core? That's too far away. As they spoke, the two of them arrived at their destination. This place had green mountains and clear waters, and spiritual aura lingered in the air. It was indeed a good place to open an immortal's cave. Luo Fengxue used the identity tablet to open the restriction and led Mo Tiange directly into the cave. They bypassed the protective formation and pushed open the stone door. Before Luo Fengxue even entered, she already called out loudly, Master. Mo Tiange followed Luo Fengxue into the hall and saw a dignified Daoist in his 40s sitting inside. When the Daoist saw Luo Fengxue, he glared at her. Why are you making so much noise? Luo Fengxue wasn't afraid at all. She giggled and said, Disciple just wants to see Master, right? Master, why are you still blaming me? Upon seeing her mischievous smile, the Daoist felt angry and amused at the same time. You're the only one who knows how to talk. All right, go to the side. With proper business in front of them, Luo Fengxue didn't dare to cause trouble. She obediently stood to the side and reported, Master, this is the new junior martial sister Mo, Mo Tiange. Did you ask me to bring her here because you want to accept her as your disciple? The Taoist didn't answer and just shifted his gaze to Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange knew the person in front of her was Master Taoist Xianyin, so she bowed and saluted him. Junior Mo Tiange greets Senior Xianyin. No need to be so polite. Master Taoist Xianyin was very good-natured. He said gently, "Come here." Although this wasn't her first time seeing a core formation senior, it was her first time facing him directly. Mo Tiange was a bit nervous, but she still calmly walked towards him. Master Taoist Xianyin reached out and grabbed her wrist. A gentle but thick spiritual aura immediately poured into her meridians. A moment later, Master Taoist Xianyin was slightly surprised. Your spiritual roots, Mo Tiange's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that because my spiritual roots aren't good, he doesn't plan to accept me as a disciple? 5 spiritual roots, and all of them are equally strong and weak. Could this be the rumored spiritual roots of the origin? Mo Tiange's heart skipped a beat. Master Taoist Xianyin knows about the spiritual roots of the origin? Upon seeing her expression, Master Taoist Xianyin showed a faint smile and let go of her hand. It seems you know about the uniqueness of your spiritual roots. Can you tell me where you learned about them? Although Master Taoist Xianyin's attitude was cordial, he was a core formation cultivator after all, so Mo Tiange didn't dare to deceive him. Several thousand years ago, a cultivator also appeared in Junior's clan. That ancestor cultivated until the nascent soul realm, but his lifespan was exhausted and he still couldn't advance to the next realm. Thus, before he passed away, he left a wisp of his primordial spirit in the clan. Junior has spiritual roots, so the restriction my ancestor left behind was triggered. Junior then passed on the cultivation technique and told Junior that my spiritual roots are the spiritual roots of the origin. So that's what happened. Master Taoist Xianyin stroked his beard and nodded. Your ancestor lived several thousand years ago, so it's no wonder he knows about the spiritual roots of the origin. Mo Tiange carefully observed Master Taoist Xianyin's expression. After pondering for a moment, she asked, ever since Junior set foot on the path of immortality, I've always wanted to know about the spiritual roots of the origin. Since Senior knows this is the spiritual roots of the origin, do you know about its mysteries? Master Taoist Xianyin stared at her and shook his head regretfully. Many years ago, my master mentioned the spiritual roots of the origin by chance. It seems there's something special about it, but I don't know what it is. Mo Tiange couldn't help but feel disappointed when she didn't get an answer. Master Taoist Xianyin smiled and said, let's not talk about this first. Mo Tiange, I asked Feng Shue to call you here because I wanted to talk about you entering the school. Upon hearing him mentioning business, Mo Tiange immediately adjusted her mood and said respectfully, Senior, please speak. Master Taoist Xianyin's expression became serious. He stared at her and asked solemnly, Mo Tiange, since you entered Xianqing School, Lord Taoist Jinghe of Clear Spring Peak wants to accept you as his registered disciple. Are you willing? Ah. The one who cried out involuntarily was Luo Fengxue, who had been standing on the side. She stared at Mo Tiange in astonishment. She always thought since Mo Tiange was brought back by martial uncle Shoujing, she would most likely be accepted as a disciple by one of the martial uncles. She never expected it would actually be Grandmaster. Mo Tiange was even more astonished. She was originally just an ordinary little cultivator. Not to mention a nascent soul cultivator's registered disciple, she never thought she'd be an elite disciple. On this trip to Xianqing School, out of respect for Master Taoist Shoujing, Xianqing School was already very kind to accept her. She never expected. Could it be that Xianqing School still had ulterior motives towards her? Mo Tiange. Junior is here. She calmed herself down, but she still couldn't hide her nervousness. Upon seeing her expression, Master Taoist Xianyin smiled and said gently, don't think too much. Master only accepted you as a registered disciple out of respect for junior martial brother Shoujing. Before you form your gold core, you'll be taught by me, and your seniority will be the same as mine. If you form your gold core one day, Master will officially accept you as his inner disciple. This explanation calmed Mo Tiange down. Her identity was the same as Luo Fengshue's. Master only gave her a brighter future. In the future, if she really formed her gold core, it would be very normal for a nascent soul cultivator to accept her as a disciple. However, she also knew that being a nascent soul cultivator's registered disciple was currently an enormous honor for a small aura refining disciple like her. She immediately brushed off her robes, knelt down and said respectfully, "Senior is accepting me as a disciple on behalf of Master. Please accept this junior's master-disciple ceremony." Master Daoist Xianin watched with a smile. It was only after Mo Tiange respectfully kowtowed 3 times that he helped her up. "From now on, you'll be with Fengxue. As for how to address me, you can call me Martial Uncle. I hope one day, you can call me Senior Martial Brother." Chapter 97. Tiange, you're really lucky. Luo Fengxue was half envious and half joking. She looked at the sky and sighed. Grandmaster's registered disciple. Why can't I be this lucky? Mo Tiange just smiled without showing any joy. Aren't I the same as you now? I'll have to ask Senior Martial Sister Luo to take care of me in the future. Martial Uncle Xianin said she'd be with Senior Martial Sister Luo in the future, so she'd have to take care of Senior Martial Sister Luo, who was very popular and capable. Luo Fengxue just said it casually, so she didn't take it seriously. She smiled and said, "Of course. You'll become my martial uncle in the future, so of course I have to take advantage of this opportunity to please you." The two of them chatted for a while before Luo Fengxue took her to settle down. Cultivation group disciples were divided into several categories. The general categories were part-time disciples, formal disciples, and elite disciples. When Mo Tiange was in Yunwu's sect, she was only a formal disciple, which was above part-time disciples. She was also the most common disciple in the sect. She didn't have a master, so she could only listen to a senior's lecture together with hundreds or even thousands of people. As for elite disciples, they were disciples who had a master. Although seniority was determined by cultivation level in the cultivation world, the seniority of a real master was strictly regulated and wouldn't change with the change of cultivation level. Therefore, although Luo Fengxue was in the aura refining realm like her, she could call a senior in the core formation realm martial uncle. Disciples with a master were divided into several categories. Those with the lowest status were registered disciples. Registered disciples couldn't be regarded as real disciples because masters wouldn't teach them personally. Therefore, Mo Tiange could only be with Luo Fengxue now, which made her 1 generation lower. However, because the one who accepted her as a registered disciple was a nascent soul cultivator, her status was naturally different. Even Master Daoist Xianin had to be polite to her. The most common ones were inner disciples. Those who were accepted by high-level cultivators were inner disciples and could receive guidance from their master. If their master was satisfied with their cultivation level, they would be promoted to an advanced disciple. Once they became an advanced disciple, their master would teach them some secret techniques and divine abilities, and they would be ranked in the sect. Master Daoist Xianin was ranked first among Lord Daoist Jinghe's advanced disciples, so he was called the first disciple. Finally, the closest to him were his direct disciples. Direct disciples could obtain their master's true teachings, and they were also their master's successors. Generally, there would only be 1 or 2 direct disciples among all the disciples. Right now, Mo Tiange was only a registered disciple. However, because her master had an extraordinary identity and status, Luo Fengxue arranged for Mo Tiange to live next to Master Daoist Xuanin's Immortal's cave together with her fellow martial sisters. Originally, Luo Fengxue wanted to introduce Master Daoist Xuanin's several martial sisters to Mo Tiange, but they were either out or in closed-door meditation, so she had no choice but to drop the matter. Since Luo Fengxue was on duty today, she let Mo Tiange rest by herself. By the time Luo Fengxue left, Mo Tiange was already very tired, but she couldn't help but smile. She originally thought it would be hard for a large cultivation group like Xianqing School, where the relationships in the school were complicated and the disciples were arrogant, to adapt. Unexpectedly, the first person she came into contact with, Luo Fengxue, was kind and enthusiastic. Furthermore, this Grand Master Jinghe also accepted her as a registered disciple. All of this was going too smoothly for her, making her feel as if it wasn't real. Ever since she stepped onto the path of immortality, she had always been struggling bitterly. She had never had such a bright future. She also wondered whether they had ulterior motives, just like her ancestor, Mo Yaoqing. It was only after she formed her gold core that she discovered the school had already decided her future. However, after thinking about it carefully, she felt there was nothing to worry about right now. Let alone the fact that she was only an aura refining disciple. Even if Grandmaster Jinghe really harbored evil intentions, he could just use his cultivation level to force her. Why did he have to arrange these things? With this thought in mind, she settled down in a relaxed manner. Elite disciples were indeed elite disciples. The treatment they received was completely different from that of ordinary disciples. This place was very close to Master Daoist Xuanin's Immortal's Cave. It was full of spiritual aura and had a quiet and beautiful environment. The people living in the vicinity were all female disciples of his school. Each of them had a small Immortal's Cave, and each small Immortal's Cave had several rooms. There was a lounge, a cultivation room, a pill concocting room, a spiritual beast room, and so on. The furnishings of the tables and chairs were all made of green jade. This was indeed an eye-opener for Mo Tiange. As far as she knew, even Yunwu's Sex Foundation building cultivators didn't have such a good Immortal's Cave. This Xianqing school was indeed worthy of being one of the biggest cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole. The pleasant surprise of obtaining a good Immortal's Cave made her forget her exhaustion and she began to arrange it slowly. The lounge was the simplest. Now that she was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, she didn't really need to sleep, so she just arranged it casually. In the cultivation room, there were praying mats, a spirit-gathering formation, and some unimportant books. In the concocting room, she threw in the human furnace she bought in Tiandao's sect last time. There were also several empty rooms. She didn't have anything to arrange, but there was a medicinal field behind the Immortal's Cave, which gave her some ideas. The Immortal's Caves of these female disciples were all lined up side by side. Behind them was a small valley with several medicinal fields, most of which were filled with spiritual plants. Luo Fengxue said each Immortal's Cave had a medicinal field, and the owner of the Immortal's Cave could do whatever he wanted with it. Mo Tiange already planned to start learning how to concoct medicinal pills. This place was full of spiritual aura, so it was indeed a good place to plant spiritual plants. She planned to ask Luo Fengxue tomorrow where she could get seeds. While Mo Tiange was busily arranging her Immortal's Cave, Lord Daoist Jinghe was still leaning on his dragon couch in the tallest Immortal's Cave on Clear Spring Peak. However, this time, there were no beauties to serve him, and there were no grapes to eat. Instead, he was lazily flipping through a book. After reading for a while, he sneered and said disdainfully, "What kind of rotten thing is this? Do ancient cultivators use this kind of animal skin to make paper? They don't even know they've been deceived." He waved the book and threw it towards Master Daoist Xianin, who was sitting below. Master Daoist Xianin caught the book. His expression was twisted, but he still retained a trace of hope. He asked, "Master, is it really fake?" Qin Jinghe sat up and took the tea handed to him by his disciple. He pursed his lips and said, "Yes, it's fake." From the distant past era to the Middle Ages, frost stone beasts only existed in the south of the mountain, and their numbers were extremely small. Later, during the Middle Ages, when the righteous and devil paths fought against each other and the world changed, the number of frost stone beasts increased. Not to mention the material of this book, the content alone is specious. It can deceive a core formation cultivator like you. You want to deceive me? No way. Perhaps because Master Daoist Xuanin's expression was too distressed, Qin Jinghe asked, "How much did you spend?" 300, only 300 spirit stones? Oh, forget it then. Not to mention him, even core formation cultivators wouldn't care about such a small amount of money. However, Master Daoist Xianin said, Master, it's 300 mid-grade spirit stones. What? Qin Jing had jumped. In the cultivation world, low-grade spirit stones were commonly used. Mid-grade spirit stones weren't easy to find. 300 mid-grade spirit stones were more than 30,000 low-grade spirit stones. 300 mid-grade spirit stones. Brat, you're really... Qin Jinghe wanted to criticize him, but on second thought, he decided to let it go. Xianqing School was one of the best cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole, but core formation cultivators only earned a few thousand spirit stones a year. This time, he was deceived. You're really regressing the more you live. Qin Jinghe couldn't accept the loss of spirit stones, so he cursed him fiercely. Speak. Which guy deceived you? I'm going to kill him and make him regret being born in this world. Master Daoist Xianin was also distressed. When he heard Qin Jinghe's words, he hastily said, Master, I also obtained it from an unknown place. I've never even seen that person's face, let alone looking for him. His master's killing intent was very heavy. Every time he killed someone, he would be reprimanded by the head elder. Then, when he came back, he would scold the troublemaker. Qin Jinghe didn't want to be reprimanded by his master like a 3-year-old child. Besides, he really didn't have any clues, so he already admitted defeat. Seeing that Qin Jinghe was about to say something, Master Daoist Xianin hastily said, Master, disciple has something to report to you. It's about that registered disciple you just accepted. The latter part of his words pulled Qin Jinghe's attention back. Master Daoist Xianin said cautiously, Master, I checked that Imotinga's spiritual roots. It seems to be the spiritual roots of the origin you mentioned before. What? Qin Jinghe glared at him. Spiritual roots of the origin? You mean the spiritual roots of the origin that have all 5 spiritual roots and are equally strong and weak? Yes. Master Daoist Xianin looked at his expression and said doubtfully, Master, what's so mysterious about this spiritual root? I remember you said the spiritual roots of the origin is one of several kinds of special spiritual roots. It's not inferior to mutated spiritual roots and single spiritual roots. Unfortunately, it hasn't appeared in a long time. Qin Jinghe didn't answer him. Instead, he muttered to himself in disbelief, spiritual roots of the origin? This girl is interesting. Pure Yin constitution is already hard to come by in 1,000 years, and spiritual roots of the origin haven't appeared in several thousand years. Unexpectedly, both of them appeared in her body. After thinking for a while, he remembered that his disciple was still here, so he said to Master Daoist Xianin, Do you know what Dao is when we cultivate? This question stunned Master Daoist Xianin for a moment. Xianqing School was a Dao school. When disciples entered the school, even if they were part-time disciples, they had to start with Daoist scriptures. The question, what is Dao, was both shallow and deep. Any disciple in the school could answer it, but even nascent soul cultivators couldn't give an exact answer. It was rare for Qin Jinghe to have the demeanor of a nascent soul cultivator. With a stern expression, he said, Dao is the heaven and earth, the universe, the void, the rules, the origin. It can even be considered as anything. However, in the distant past era, the so-called Dao mainly contained one meaning, balance. The so-called balance is balance, checks and balances, as well as permanence and eternity. With balance, the world can exist. With checks and balances, the rules can be maintained. Only in this way can the world be eternal. Master Daoist Xianin was startled. So, this spiritual roots of the origin is a kind of existence that completely conforms to the Dao of the distant past era? Qin Jinghe nodded slightly. Yes. With our current cultivation method, the fewer spiritual roots we have, the better it is because the spiritual aura entering the body counteracts each other. However, in the distant past era, there was another cultivation method. This. Master Daoist Xianin was dumbfounded. In other words, in the distant past era, this kind of spiritual roots of the origin was actually a heaven-gifted talent? Qin Jinghe heaved a sigh. Unfortunately, the distant past era was too long ago. In the Middle Ages era, the cultivation method was already changed. Nowadays, it's impossible to know the cultivation method of balance. This child. What a pity. Chapter 98. A muffled sound came from inside the furnace. Mo Tiange stopped the fire in her dantian and opened the furnace. The medicinal fragrance had already turned into a burnt smell, and the spiritual plants had also become a pile of dregs. She shook her head and poured away the dregs. She then scooped some water from the stone pit next to her and cleaned the furnace. She then put in the right amount of materials and continued to concoct medicinal pills. Although this immortal's cave was small, it had everything. There were many springs on Clear Spring Peak, and there was also spring water in the concocting room, so concocting medicinal pills was very convenient. The good environment and abundant spiritual aura made Mo Tiange feel that concocting medicinal pills wasn't that boring. She also felt that carefully sensing the changes during concocting and grasping the subtle differences was also very fun. It had been almost a month since she came to Xianqing school, and she felt that her whole body was very relaxed. Here, she had her own immortal's cave and a core formation cultivator to guide her. She also didn't need to bear the shackles of her identity. Moreover, she was now an elite disciple of Xianqing school, so she received quite a lot of medicinal pills and spirit stones every month. She also had a share of the disciple quota issued by Master Daoist Xianin. This meant that she didn't need to worry about miscellaneous things and only needed to concentrate on cultivating. When she first came here, Martial Uncle Xianin checked her cultivation situation and told her to first transform all the spiritual aura in her body into Yin's spiritual aura before building her foundation. These days, she followed Martial Uncle Xuanin's instructions and slowly condensed her spiritual aura. When she had free time, she slowly refined medicinal pills by herself. She didn't know whether it was because she was in a good mood or because she was overflowing with spiritual aura, but her success rate in concocting medicinal pills had also increased a lot. These days, her success rate in concocting basic medicinal pills had already reached 40%. This success rate was at the level of ordinary concoctions masters, so it made her a little more confident. In fact, her talent in concocting medicinal pills wasn't that bad. She also asked Luo Fengxue for seeds for the medicinal field behind the cave and planted them in her own medicinal field. However, she would have to wait at least 10 years for these medicinal plants to be usable. In addition, she also met several other martial sisters. Master Daoist Xianin didn't have many female disciples. Including Luo Fengxue, he only had 3. The other 2 had already built their foundations. Eldest martial sister, Han Qingyu, had a steady personality and treated people kindly. According to Luo Fengxue, this eldest martial sister was very popular among her fellow martial brothers and they also liked to get along with her. If they had any problems in the future, asking her for help would definitely be the right choice. Second martial sister Wei Jiasi had a rather arrogant temperament. After a brief meeting, she said she wanted to cultivate and return to her own cave. Luo Fengxue secretly told Mo Tiange that this second martial sister, who had always been proud of her outstanding talent, must have been jealous that Mo Tiange was accepted as Grandmaster's registered disciple, so she didn't give Mo Tiange any face. However, arrogant people were straightforward and would not take the initiative to bully others. It would be fine as long as they did not provoke her. Mo Tiange just laughed it off. Back when she entered Yunwu's sect, she lived by the principle of don't slap a smiling person when she interacted with her fellow disciples. She greeted everyone with a smile and didn't want to incur any enmity. Her current situation was more than 10 times better than Yunwu's sect's, so how could she possibly take Xiaoxiao's cold face seriously? As for Qin Shi, ever since he brought her back, the two of them had never seen each other again. They didn't even ask about her. Mo Tiange asked Luo Fengxue about Qin Shi's situation, but Luo Fengxue only told her that martial uncle was doing well and that he entered closed-door meditation right after he came back. Apparently, Luo Fengxue wasn't willing to say anything else. This news made Mo Tiange feel a bit sour in her heart. She naturally knew that Xianqing school was his real sect and that the people here were closer to him than she was. It was just that, on the other hand, she also felt relieved. Even though she was now accepted as Grand Master Jinghe's registered disciple, the difference between her and Qin Shi's status was still like heaven and earth. If they didn't meet again in the future, she could easily suppress her emotional fluctuations to avoid them becoming an inner demon in the future. In fact, she also thought about it carefully. Was this kind of feeling really the love between a man and a woman? She really hadn't experienced it before. She just felt that Qin Shi was a bit more special than other people. She liked to see him very much and was somewhat reluctant to part with him when they were apart. But on second thought, she also felt that if he didn't exist and she didn't see him again, it wouldn't be so hard to bear. In the end, even she herself was confused. Maybe she was just worrying too much. Maybe she was just very grateful because he saved her in a desperate situation. Besides, when she was in pain from losing second uncle, he was by her side. Maybe she just transferred her feelings for second uncle to him. Inside the concocting room, the medicinal fragrance gradually became stronger. Mo Tiange sensed that the medicinal pills inside the furnace had already taken shape, so she withdrew her thoughts. She silently calculated in her heart and opened the furnace the moment she got the right control. Several light-colored medicinal pills lay at the bottom of the furnace, each of them clear and transparent. She picked up these medicinal pills, fiddled with them for a while, then poured them into the prepared jade bottle with satisfaction. The raw materials she bought in Tiandao's sect were all used now, and her pill concocting skills also improved rapidly. Concocting these basic medicinal pills was no longer a problem, so she could try to concoct higher-level medicinal pills. She stopped concocting and adjusted her breath for a while in the concocting room, preparing to go out for a trip after she was done. Aside from the small town at the foot of the mountain, Xianqing School also had a small market square specially prepared for disciples. All the shops were opened by the school, and the people who came here were all disciples. The things they sold were of good quality and cheap. More importantly, it was very safe to do business here. Before she finished adjusting her breath, the formation outside the cave fluctuated and a sound-transmitting talisman flew in. Mo Tiange took it. The talisman burned without fire, and a familiar voice rang in her ears, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I'm outside." Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't feel happy. Instead, she frowned. She really didn't want to see Qin Shi right now. But he was already at the door, so how could she not see him? She sighed, stood up, straightened her clothes, and tried to show a normal smile. When she felt her mood didn't fluctuate, she went to the entrance of the cave. The stone door opened, and a person with his hands clasped behind his back appeared with his back facing her. He was wearing a loose robe with big sleeves, and his posture was tall and straight. Just by looking at his back, she could already feel his heroic spirit. His gaze was currently focused on something in the distance. When he heard the sound of the stone door opening, he turned around. Mo Tiange was dumbfounded when she turned around. She was familiar with the face of the person in front of her, but he gave off a completely unfamiliar feeling. She couldn't help but feel puzzled as she looked at the person in front of her. In terms of clothes, although the black clothes of ordinary Yunwu sect disciples were a bit plain, they weren't ugly. Why did this senior martial brother Qin look so inconspicuous before? Now, just by changing his attire, he felt that he was elegant and noble. She had never seen Lord Daoist Jinghe, but if she did, she would definitely find that Qin Shi's current appearance was 50 to 60% similar to Lord Daoist Jinghe. While she was sizing up Qin Shi was also sizing her up. For a moment, amazement flashed in his eyes. He didn't expect that this junior martial brother Yi, who didn't seem to have any makeup, would actually be so elegant and beautiful after changing into women's clothes. In fact, he also saw her wearing women's clothes several months ago, but at that time, she was too disheveled, so she quickly changed back into men's clothes, so he couldn't remember what she looked like afterwards. However, it only lasted for a moment before he reacted. He smiled naturally and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you look much better in women's clothes than before." Qin Shi's praise was too magnanimous, making Imo Tiange feel a bit ashamed of her own thoughts. Whether it was his attitude or the way they got along, Qin Shi still treated her as Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Compared to him like this, she felt she wasn't sincere enough. Therefore, she also adjusted her mentality and teased him with a smile. Senior Marshal Brother Qin's appearance is also very different today. I'm curious. Senior Marshal Brother, why do you pretend to be a waiter in Yunwu's sect? Qin Shi was stunned, but he couldn't help but laugh. Waiter, this is a good metaphor. Once he finished laughing, he shook his head and said, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you're still as quick-witted as ever. I'm relieved now. Mo Tiange was stunned by his words, but a warm feeling slowly welled up in her heart. She could feel that Qin Shi's mind was magnanimous. What he said had nothing to do with the feelings between a man and a woman. This was a kind of concern without any ulterior motives, so it made her feel even more warm. She couldn't help but wonder whether this kind of feeling was better than the feelings between a man and a woman she expected. Junior Marshal Brother Yi? Upon hearing his voice, Mo Tiange finally realized the two of them had been standing at the door. She hastily moved to the side and said, Sorry, Senior Marshal Brother Qin. Come in and take a seat. No. Qin Shi looked around and said implicitly, I came to deliver something. Several senior marshal sisters lived here, so Mo Tiange understood he wanted to avoid arousing suspicion, so she didn't force him. She just smiled and said, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, do you have any treasures to give me? Qin Shi took out a half-foot square box inlaid with gold and jade from his Qinkuan bag and handed it to her. I went into closed-door meditation to stabilize my realm after I came back, so I never thought about it. Now that I'm out of closed-door meditation, I finally remembered that your identity is different now and you might need these things. His expression was very strange, and his eyes seemed to be wandering, as if he was embarrassed. Mo Tiange felt even more baffled. She took the box suspiciously, opened the lid, and was stunned. Qin Shi coughed and said, These aren't treasures. These are just gifts from the secular world's Qin clan. Gold, silver, and jewelry are useless to us cultivators, so we've been throwing them away. But presumably, you female cultivators still need them. Mo Tiange picked up a hairpin from the box. It was made of light green warm jade and had a bright luster. There were no unnecessary carvings on it. It was simple, elegant, and exquisite. She never thought someone would actually give her something to dress up after she regained her female body. She was excited, but she just slowly exhaled and closed the box. She then looked up and said with a smile, Thank you. I've never used such precious things. Seeing her calm reaction, Qin Shi heaved a sigh of relief and also smiled. What precious? They're just some mundane things. It's good if you have some use for them. How is it not precious? This is the first time I've received jewelry. Mo Tiange suddenly stopped talking because she felt these words seemed a bit ambiguous. Damn it. Didn't I just want to be frank with him? Why does it seem wrong in the blink of an eye? Qin Shi didn't feel anything and continued to say, I think so too. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. He paused, shook his head, and said with a smile, No, with your current appearance, it's not appropriate to always call you Junior Marshal Brother. Junior Marshal Sister Mo? Mo Tiange was stunned. This seems a bit strange. True. Qin Shi raised his head and thought for a moment. How about we call each other by their names? Xiaotian or Tiange? Huh. This, seeing her expression, Qin Shi couldn't help but laugh. It's just a joke, but I really don't know how to call you in the future. This was indeed a problem. In the future, he couldn't always call her Junior Marshal Brother Yi. It would make other people feel strange. Actually, I don't mind calling you by your name. In any case, he also called Feng Shue by her name, so it wouldn't be strange if he called her by her name. Really? Then I'll. He stopped talking and looked to the side. At that moment, a person came out of the immortal's cave next to them. She seemed to sense there were people here, so she looked over curiously. It was second Marshall's sister Wei Jessie. She calmly turned around and said with a smile, I'll go back first. Next time you need me, just send me a sound-transmitting talisman. Since there were other people watching from the side, Tiange naturally wouldn't make him stay. She politely said, thank you for today. See you later. She nodded and walked away. When he was far away, Tiange turned around and greeted Wei Jessie with a smile. Senior Marshal Sister Wei. Wei Jessie's expression was a bit strange. There was shock, confusion, and displeasure on her face. In the end, she just gave Tiange a faint glance and entered the immortal's cave. Chapter 99. Tiange naturally didn't know what Wei Jessie was shocked about, but right now, she couldn't care less about it. Now that her cultivation technique was more or less complete and her pill concocting had also gradually entered a good state, it was time for her to prepare to build her foundation. She had 1 foundation building pill and 2 foundation refining pills. If she could concoct constitution enhancing pills, then under Marshal Uncle Schwanin's guidance, her chances of building her foundation would be very high. She had already bought the remaining ingredients for the constitution-enhancing pill one by one. Now, she only lacked the other 500-year-old spiritual herb, green fern. Thus, she asked the shop in the inner sanctum to help her keep an eye out for it. She didn't know whether it was because the sex shop had a sufficient supply or because of Lord Daoist Jinghe's reputation, but a few days later, she received a sound-transmitting talisman saying the black fern had arrived. Tiange hurriedly packed her things then went to the inner school market square. The inner sect market was on the main peak. It wasn't big and only had 2 streets. However, there were many disciples and people coming and going. It was very lively. Most of the shops here were opened by the various peaks, and the disciples of the peaks could get discounts in the shops. In addition, disciples who wanted to sell things could directly set up a small stall on the side of the street. It was very convenient. The law enforcement hall would protect anyone who bought or sold here. If anyone was found to be selling or buying or selling by force, they would be ordered to refund their money. If it was serious, they might even be expelled from the sect. Therefore, the disciples of the sect liked to come here. Once she arrived at this small market square, she didn't stop and directly went to the medicinal pills hall on Clear Spring Peak, which had notified her of the arrival of the goods. This medicinal hall wasn't big, but its business was very good. Aura refining disciples came and went from time to time, and foundation building cultivators were also not uncommon. Luo Fengxue once told Tiange that Xianqing School had more than 500 foundation building disciples. Tiange believed her. On Mount Taikong, one could easily run into foundation building cultivators whenever they went out. Obviously, there were a lot of them. Senior Marshal Brother, Tiange stepped into the shop and called out to the busy shop assistant, I'm here to pick up the black fern. The shop assistant was wearing ordinary disciple's clothes and his cultivation level was only in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm. Upon hearing her words, he turned around and saw the clothes she was wearing. He waved his hand repeatedly. Senior Marshal Sister, you're really overpraising me. Green fern? Are you Senior Marshal Sister Mo from Clear Spring Peak? Upon seeing the shop assistant's terrified expression, Tiange finally realized that her identity was different now. She didn't need to be as humble as she was in Yunwu's sect. She was Patriarch Jinghe's registered disciple. This identity was something even foundation building cultivators coveted. In Xianqing School, it didn't matter if she was a bit arrogant, but if her attitude was too low, people would look down on her instead. Thinking to this point, she calmly accepted and said to the waiter, that's right. You sent me a message saying that the 500-year-old fern has arrived. I'm here to pick it up. Yes, yes. Senior sister, please wait here for a moment. The shop assistant said and hurriedly ran to the back. Senior Marshal Sister. Another waiter served tea and said to her with a smile, "Please take a seat and have a cup of tea." Mo Tiange nodded at him and said, "Thank you." Just as he picked up his teacup, another person came in. When the waiter serving tea saw this person, he hurriedly went forward to greet him. "Marshal Uncle Yi, you're here." The person who came in was a foundation establishment cultivator, and he had the appearance of a young man. He casually glanced around the shop then asked, "Are the 7 stars begonia in stock?" The waiter smiled and said, "It just arrived today." "Please take a seat, I'll go get it." As he said that, the waiter shouted towards the inside of the shop. He then invited the young man to sit next to him and serve him tea. The young man took a sip of tea. As if he sensed Mo Tiange's gaze, he turned around and gave her a kind smile then continued to drink tea with his head lowered. This person's attitude was peaceful. He obviously didn't know her identity, but he didn't reprimand her for being rude. Apparently, he was a gentle person. Mo Tiange didn't show the respect ordinary aura refining disciples showed when they saw a foundation building senior. Instead, she looked hesitant and asked tentatively, "May I ask who this martial uncle is?" Upon hearing her voice, the man looked up. Mo Tiange carefully looked at this person's extremely heroic face and recalled how he called her Martial Uncle Yi just now. She was about 50 to 60% sure, but she still needed to confirm something. "Martial Uncle, is your surname Yi, and your name is Jingwen?" Once she said that, the person in front of her revealed a puzzled expression. "Yes, you know me?" Sure enough, it's him. Yi Jingwen's appearance hadn't changed much. 10 years was nothing to a foundation-building cultivator. Now that he still looked like a young man, she recognized him at first glance. Looking at his familiar face, Mo Tiange felt many things from the past resurfaced in her mind. "Martial Uncle, do you remember the Mo family's village in Lianqing City in Jin Country 10 years ago?" Yi Jingwen was stunned for a moment, then he looked a little surprised. He looked at her carefully and finally came to a realization. You're that little girl?" Mo Tiange nodded with a smile then stood up and saluted him. "Back then, I didn't appreciate your kindness and left without saying goodbye. Today, I apologize to you." Seeing her salute him so cautiously, Yi Jingwen hastily stood up and also saluted her. "Please don't regard me as an outsider. It's also my fault for not explaining clearly." Before he could finish his sentence, the waiter who fetched the goods ran back and shouted, "Martial Uncle Yi, Senior Martial Sister Mo, your spiritual plants. Ah, you two know each other." The waiter was obviously confused and even forgot to hand them the medicine. The other waiter was quick-witted. He took the medicine and handed it to the two of them. "Martial Uncle Yi, Grandmaster Mo, take a look. Is there any problem with this thing?" Mo Tiange and Yi Jingwen looked at each other and smiled. They each took the things they wanted. "Not bad. This black fern is old enough. How much is it?" The waiter said, "It's 300 spirit stones in total. Since you're a disciple of Clear Spring Peak, you can get a 10% discount, so it's 270 spirit stones. Even if black ferns weren't rare, this price was already very cheap for a 500-year-old spiritual plant." Mo Tiange didn't say anything and paid the spirit stones. By the time she put away the spiritual plants, Yi Jingwen had finished his transaction and walked towards her. "This. Tiange?" Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. Yi Jingwen also smiled. As the two of them walked out of the shop, Mo Tiange heard him say, "I was in closed-door meditation a while ago. I only heard you came to Xianqing School 2 days ago when I came out, so I didn't have time to greet you. You've really grown up. I couldn't even recognize you." No wonder he wasn't too surprised. It turned out he already heard about it. "Martial Uncle Yi, hey, don't call me that." Yi Jingwen shook his head to stop her. "I already know Grandmaster Jinghe accepted you as a registered disciple. Even if registered disciples aren't ranked according to seniority, you're still being taught by Martial Uncle Xianin now, right? According to the rules, it's enough for you to call me Senior Martial Brother." Besides, back then, you called me Big Brother Yi. This. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then changed the way she addressed him. Big Brother Yi. Yi Jingwen sighed with emotion. In the blink of an eye, so many years have passed. You're also a big girl now. Tiange, have you been well all these years? For a moment, Mo Tiange didn't know how to answer this question. If she said she was well, she'd actually suffered a lot. If she said she wasn't well, second uncle treated her like his own life, which made her feel really happy. I've been doing okay. Yi Jingwen could see her complicated expression, so he thought she'd had a hard time all these years. He sighed and said, "It's my fault for not explaining things clearly back then. After the two of you went missing, I didn't understand what happened. It wasn't until I heard about you 2 days ago that I finally knew there was such a reason. In fact, Mo Tiange felt very sorry for what happened back then. She always suspected he had bad intentions. Now that she heard he was confused for 10 years, she couldn't help but feel apologetic. I'm sorry, Big Brother Yi. My second uncle was just worried, so he caused you to fail your mission." Yi Jingwen said, "You don't have to be like that. You left on your own accord, and Senior Marshal Brother Zheng from Mount Dongmeng testified for me. I wasn't punished, and Marshal Uncle Shoujing even gave me a lot of benefits. If it weren't for that, how could I have entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm so quickly? Then I have to congratulate Big Brother Yi." Mo Tiange knew Yi Jingwen wasn't very old. Back then, he seemed to be about 30 years old, so presumably, he was only 40 years old now, right? He was already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at this age, so he could be considered very young. Yi Jingwen smiled and shook his head. I was just lucky, it wasn't my own ability. On the contrary, you were only in the second layer of the aura refining realm back then, but you reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm 10 years later. You're not any worse than the elite disciples of big cultivation groups. Mo Tiange just smiled. I just ate a lot of medicinal pills. What she said was the truth. If second uncle didn't make her eat medicinal pills, she would have been in the 6th or 7th layer of the aura refining realm at most. It would have been too early for her to build her foundation. Don't be so modest. If you'd been at Xianqing school all these years, I definitely wouldn't have praised you. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. What he said was true. Others might not know her aptitude, but Yi Jingwen was very clear about it. With 5 spiritual roots and no big cultivation group to rely on, being able to cultivate to the foundation building realm in 10 years was already very rare. Right, how did you meet Marshal Uncle Shoujing? This is too much of a coincidence. Mo Tiange was puzzled. I didn't meet Marshal Uncle Shoujing. I just met Senior Marshal Brother Qin Shi. My second uncle used a sound-transmitting talisman to ask Marshal Uncle Shoujing for help. Coincidentally, he was nearby, so I was ordered to come and help. Qin Shi? Yi Jingwen was baffled. This name, he'd never heard of it. Although there were many people in Clear Spring Peak, since this person could make Marshal Uncle Shoujing entrust this kind of thing to him, he should at least be an advanced inner disciple like them. Yes, Big Brother Yi, do you know him? Senior Marshal Brother Qin is Marshal Uncle Shoujing's blood-related junior, so he should be in the same generation as you. Blood-related junior? Although Yi Jingwen still didn't understand what was going on, his intuition told him that there must be something wrong. In fact, he also didn't know what Marshal Uncle Shoujing's real name was. Could it be, with that thought in mind, Yi Jingwen asked again, the Senior Marshal Brother Qin you mentioned? Is he about the same height as me, doesn't like to talk, has few expressions, and only likes to cultivate every day? I see. But it's not like Senior Marshal Brother Qin doesn't like to talk. After we get to know each other, he often smiles. Big Brother Yi, what's wrong? Mo Tiange felt a bit strange. Is Senior Marshal Brother Qin not popular? Why does everyone look like this when they know I know Senior Marshal Brother Qin? It's nothing. Yi Jingwen wiped the sweat from his face and changed the topic. Are you going to build your foundation now? Mo Tiange nodded. Almost. After some time, I'll finish my preparations and enter closed-door meditation to build my foundation. And being well prepared is only good for building your foundation. There's no harm in doing so. If there's anything you need my help with, don't hesitate to tell me. Seeing how serious he was, Mo Tiange smiled and said, Thank you. Chapter 100. After reuniting with Yi Jingwen, Mo Tiange often received things from him. Sometimes it was some ancient books he collected, and sometimes it was his own experiences, all of which were helpful to her. In fact, if she thought about it carefully, Yi Jingwen might have wanted to curry favor with martial uncle Shoujing when he befriended second uncle and tried to get closer to her. However, Yi Jingwen didn't let them down. Now that he knew she had suffered a lot over the years and that he always looked after her, Mo Tiange only felt grateful towards him. Under martial uncle Xuaning's guidance, Mo Tiange's cultivation was also very smooth. In several months, the spiritual aura in her body had completely transformed into Yin's spiritual aura. Her pill concocting progress was also smooth. Although she wasted a lot of materials, she still managed to concoct constitution-enhancing pills before she ran out of materials. After adjusting her mentality, she reported to martial uncle Xianin that she was going to enter closed-door meditation to build her foundation. In the hall of Master Daoist Xuanin's Immortal's Cave, Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue stood together in the center. Master Daoist Xianin was sitting cross-legged in the hall with many of his disciples standing on either side. Some were smiling at him while some were expressionless. After a long time, Master Daoist Xianin opened his eyes and looked at the two of them. Mo Tiange looked calm, but Luo Fengxue was a bit excited. Today was the day they would enter closed-door meditation to build their foundation. Coincidentally, Luo Fengxue had already decided to build her foundation in the near future, so the two of them chose the same day. Master Daoist Xianin looked at them for a while then said slowly, The two of you have succeeded in your cultivation. Today, you'll enter closed-door meditation to build your foundation. I'm very pleased that you're about to take a new step forward. Luo Fengxue knelt down and said, It's all thanks to Master's guidance. Mo Tiange also knelt down. Although she wasn't martial uncle Xuanin's disciple, he had been teaching her for the past several months, so it was natural for him to treat her like a master and a disciple. Master Daoist Xianin smiled and said, After you enter closed-door meditation, I'll keep an eye on you with my divine sense. If anything goes wrong, I'll tell you to stop. Therefore, you can focus on building your foundation without worrying. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue said together, Thank you, martial uncle, master. Master Daoist Xianin nodded and gestured for them to stand up. He then took out 2 jade bottles from inside his robe and ordered eldest martial sister Han Xingyu, who was standing on the side, to give them to them. These are mind-calming pills Grandmaster bestowed upon you. They can help the two of you condense your spiritual aura. After you take the foundation building pills, take these pills as well. Yes. Alright, you guys can go now. Once he finished speaking, Master Daoist Xianin closed his eyes. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue solemnly saluted him then slowly withdrew from his immortal's cave. Tiange. On their way back, Luo Fengxue asked with a heavy heart, Are you confident? Mo Tiange, on the other hand, was calm. She gently shook her head and said, I'm not sure. Upon hearing what Mo Tiange said, Luo Fengxue seemed to heave a sigh of relief. She then softly confessed, To tell you the truth, I'm very scared. I had an older brother who was extremely talented since he was young. Everyone thought that he would have no problem reaching foundation establishment, but in the end, he failed twice. In the end, he was plagued by inner demons and committed suicide. Mo Tiange's heart thumped. She knew those who were accepted as disciples by core formation cultivators definitely had double spiritual roots or higher. Since Luo Fengxue mentioned her brother's natural endowments were outstanding, then her brother's natural endowments must be even higher than double spiritual roots. such a person unexpectedly fell at the foundation building stage. Sure enough, Luo Fengxue continued to speak, although I also have double spiritual roots, I've never been able to compare to my older brother since I was a child. In fact, I could have built my foundation 3 years ago, but my mentality was unstable, so Master told me to wait a few more years. I'm really scared to enter closed-door meditation this time. Mo Tiange comforted her. Senior Martial Sister Luo, don't worry. Foundation building isn't something that can be done overnight. No matter how talented you are, you can't be sure you can build your foundation on the first try. So what if you fail once or twice? We're still young. If we can't succeed once or twice, we'll succeed 3 or 4 times, 5 or 6 times. Upon hearing what Mo Tiange said, Luo Fengxue calmed down a bit. She forced a smile and said, "What you said is reasonable. I'm only 22 now. Foundation building pills are issued every 3 years. Even if I succeed 10 times, I'll still be in my 50s. Exactly." Mo Tiange smiled and said, "Even among elite disciples, many of them only build their foundation when they're 40 or 50 years old, right? Don't be like your older brother. His natural endowments are obviously good and he'll definitely succeed if he persevered, but he was defeated by inner demons." As they spoke, the two of them arrived outside their cave. Luo Fengxue took a deep breath and reached out her hand to Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange understood and also reached out to hold Luo Fengxue's hand. The two of them encouraged each other. "See you in half a year." Once they returned to the cave, Mo Tiange first took a bath and changed her clothes, then burned some incense. She waited until her emotions were calm before she sat down cross-legged. The spiritual aura inside her body slowly flowed along her meridians until it reached her dantian. She emptied her mind and no longer controlled her thoughts. Gradually, she seemed to be able to hear the sound of the wind blowing outside the cave. Her divine sense slowly dispersed in the wind, but it also seemed like her whole body was moving up and down along with the wind. The fragrance of flowers and grass, the sweet smell of the earth, one by one, assaulted her senses. In the end, she couldn't hear anything and couldn't feel anything. The only thing left was the boundless world. At this moment, Mo Tiange first took a heart-calming pill, then took a foundation-building pill, a constitution-enhancing pill, and a foundation-refining pill. The moment the foundation-building pill entered her abdomen, her dantian seemed to burst into flames with a loud bang. A powerful spiritual aura exploded in her dantian and flowed into her meridians. This spiritual aura was really too overbearing. For a moment, Mo Tiange didn't know what to do. Right at that moment, she heard Martial Uncle Xuaning's shout in her mind, "Calm down. Don't resist it. Guide it slowly." Once he shouted, Mo Tiange immediately calmed down. She immediately followed Martial Uncle Xuaning's instructions and used her own spiritual aura to slowly guide this overbearing spiritual aura. At first, this spiritual aura didn't listen to her at all. It was very difficult for her to control 1 or 2 strands of it, but it soon broke free. She wasn't discouraged. In the end, she managed to control a bit of it and slowly increased it. She didn't know how much time had passed, but she finally had complete control over this spiritual aura and guided it to attack her meridians. This attack, however, was incomparably painful. Her meridians were forcibly widened. Every inch of them seemed to be broken, but they were instantly repaired. However, when the next spiritual aura attacked them, they were still broken in an instant. Amidst the incessant pain of being broken and repaired, her meridians widened little by little and became tougher. The impurities inside her body were also pushed out by this powerful force until they were expelled from her body. Her dantian, on the other hand, was on the verge of collapse. It was difficult for it to absorb this huge spiritual aura, but it was stabilized by other forces, allowing her to persevere. Mo Tiange didn't know that Master Daoist Xianin wasn't the only one paying attention to this place with his divine sense. Lord Daoist Jinghe, who was sitting on his dragon couch, muttered to himself, "This little girl isn't honest." The spiritual aura from the foundation building pill exploded, but she actually withstood it so easily. She must have taken some other spiritual panaceas. Qin Shi, who was sitting on the side, cast a glance at her but didn't say anything. Mo Tiange clenched her teeth and endured the pain. She was obviously used to the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill, but her dantian still couldn't absorb it. She knew this was related to her aptitude. Martial Uncle Xianin once told her that the better her aptitude was, the faster her dantian could absorb spiritual aura. Therefore, whether she could successfully build her foundation or not depended on whether her dantian could adapt to this impact and absorb it for her own use. A month passed, but Mo Tiange was still resisting this intense pain. 2 months passed, and the impact slowly weakened. Her dantian also stabilized. 3 months passed, and the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill in Mo Tiange's body slowly subsided. Qin Jinghe sighed softly. It's really a pity. A heaven-gifted person from the distant past era unexpectedly can't even pass this foundation-building hurdle. Qin Shi still didn't say anything, but the expression on his face definitely couldn't be considered happy. They both knew Mo Tiange failed to build her foundation this time. She withstood the pressure on her meridians, but she couldn't completely absorb the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill. Her dantian couldn't expand, so it couldn't withstand the spiritual aura of the foundation-building realm. Brat, what are you thinking about? Qin Shi sat still for a while before answering. If she had a cultivation technique from the distant past era, could she easily build her foundation, or even form her gold core or nascent soul? Qin Jinghe was stunned. You're right, but I can't be sure. The environment in the distant past era is too different from today's. Cultivation techniques from the past might not be able to adapt to today's environment with spirit veins. 6 months passed, and Mo Tiange opened her eyes. The spiritual aura inside her body had completely calmed down, and her cultivation level couldn't advance. She knew she failed, but she only sighed softly. She didn't feel disappointed, or rather, she had long prepared herself for failure. With the aptitudes of 5 spiritual roots, it was very difficult to build her foundation in one go even if she had several kinds of miraculous pills and miraculous medicines. Luo Fengshue's older brother, whose aptitudes were countless times better than hers, still failed to build his foundation. Mo Tiange quickly pulled herself together. She frowned when she smelled the sour smell lingering around her body. She got up and went into the concocting room, took off her clothes, and soaked herself in the spring water. This was a more thorough marrow cleansing than when spiritual aura entered her body. Although she didn't succeed in building her foundation, the spiritual aura inside her body became purer, and there wasn't a single trace of impurities inside. If she wanted to build her foundation in the future, she wouldn't have to go through tendon changing and marrow cleansing. The spring water washed away the stains, and the spiritual aura cleansed her body, washing away the dirt. She felt her skin was like water, as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. Even though she didn't really care about her appearance, Mo Tiange still felt happy. This foundation-building pill wasn't completely fruitless. She freshly put on her clothes, combed her hair, and stepped out of the cave. Outside the cave, Yi Jingwen and Luo Fengxue were talking about something. When they saw her coming out, they immediately turned to look at her. She called out with a smile, "Senior Marshal Sister Luo, Big Brother Yi." After sizing her up, the two of them looked disappointed. Luo Fengxue grabbed Mo Tiange's hand as if she wanted to comfort her, but she hesitated and didn't say anything. Mo Tiange just patted her hand and smiled. Luo Fengxue succeeded in building her foundation, at least this was good news. Seeing her relaxed expression, Yi Jingwen also smiled. "Don't worry, there'll be more chances in the future." Mo Tiange nodded. Thank you, Big Brother Yi. I'll persevere." She then turned to Luo Fengxue and said with a smile, "Senior Marshal Sister Luo, congratulations." Mo Tiange's reaction made Luo Fengxue sigh in relief, but her expression was still complicated. She wasn't happy because she felt it was a bit hurtful to rejoice in front of Mo Tiange, who had failed in building her foundation. Mo Tiange actually didn't care. She asked, Senior Martial Sister Luo, is Martial Uncle Xianin in his cave? He is, Luo Fengxue answered. Master is waiting for you. Do you want to greet him first? Sure. With Luo Fengxue leading the way, the three of them soon reached Master Daoist Xuanin's cave. Disciple greets Martial Uncle Xianin. Disciple failed to build her foundation and disappointed Martial Uncle. Master Daoist Xianin opened his eyes and looked her up and down. He then smiled and said, Get up. Failure isn't scary. What's scary is losing confidence. It's good that you can persevere. Yes. Rest assured, Martial Uncle. Disciple won't be depressed because of this. You should get ready. Grandmaster wants to see you. Was everyone very disappointed? Rest assured, success will come soon. Chapter 101. Mo Tiange stood in the main hall, carefully sizing up this palace-like immortal's cave. Spirit jades were the stairs, strange stones were the pillars, dragons and phoenixes were carved, an immortal aura lingered around it. She was secretly amazed. Compared to this immortal's cave, the Hall of Hu clan, the #1 clan in Tiandao sect, was nothing more than a rich man in the secular world. But what surprised her the most wasn't this palace, but the person sitting, or rather, lying on the dragon couch. It was a middle-aged man who looked a bit younger than Martial Uncle Xianin. He had black hair, a short beard, gentle eyes, and a yellow crown and brocade robe, giving off an oppressive air of nobility. His face was about 50 to 60% similar to Qin Shi's, but his lazy and indulgent aura was completely different. At this moment, he was leaning on the dragon couch, surrounded by two foundation-building maids. One was holding tea while the other was massaging his shoulders. They were quiet and extremely gentle. Mo Tiange was puzzled. Why doesn't this Grandmaster Jinghe look like a nascent soul cultivator? Besides, Xianqing School is a Dao school. How could he have the tranquility and self-discipline of a Dao cultivator? Halfway through her thoughts, Mo Tiange suddenly felt a gaze sweeping over her from the dragon couch. She hastily lowered her head, and obediently brushed off her clothes before kneeling down. Disciple Mo Tiange greets Grandmaster. Qin Jinghe didn't answer. He took the tea from the maid's hands and waved them away. Mo Tiange could feel him sizing her up unhurriedly, so she took a deep breath. She was somewhat worried that this Grandmaster wouldn't be satisfied with her failure in building her foundation this time. If Grandmaster Jinghe no longer recognized her as his registered disciple, her position would definitely be awkward. Her heart was in a mess. After a long time, she heard Grandmaster Jinghe say faintly, How do you feel about failing to build your foundation? Mo Tiange paused. Although she just thought of this question, she didn't expect Grandmaster Jinghe would ask so directly. How should she answer? She pondered for a moment then answered, Disciple doesn't have any feelings. Oh. Qin Jinghe was a bit surprised and couldn't help but frown. If you don't have any feelings, doesn't that mean you don't have any plans? He frowned and released the power of a nascent soul cultivator. Even if it was unintentional, how could a small aura refining disciple resist it? Mo Tiange tried her best to stabilize her mind and said, Disciple didn't make any mistakes in my foundation building process. I only lack talent. Disciple can't control talent, so I have no feelings and can only persevere. After she finished speaking, she felt her body lighten. Qin Jinghe pondered the matter for a moment, feeling rather amused. This little girl was really a bit interesting. She was just a little aura refining cultivator, yet she was able to remain so calm and collected. Furthermore, she was even able to calmly answer under his spiritual aura pressure. It seemed her willpower was also very firm, that brat's judgment of people was quite accurate. If she wasn't burdened by her aptitude, this child would definitely have some accomplishments. Qin smiled and said, Grandmaster, and Qi. Mo Qi, and refining Qi, and Mo Grandmaster, and refining qi, Qin Jinghe was still looking at her absent-mindedly, while Mo Tiange was obediently lowering her head. Qin Yen Qin 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 Qin. And Mo. And she, and Mo, Mo's Mo, and Mo. While she was lost in thought, Qin Jinghe suddenly asked, "What medicinal pills did you take when you built your foundation?" His question was simple, but Mo Tiange was shocked. When she built her foundation, aside from the heart-calming pill this grandmaster gave her, she also took constitution-enhancing pills and foundation-refining pills. This grandmaster actually asked her this question, so he must have noticed something. Mo Tiange thought quickly and answered, "Grandmaster, disciple took foundation-refining pills and constitution-enhancing pills." Qin Jinghe, who was drinking tea, paused and looked at her. "Foundation-refining pills and constitution-enhancing pills?" "Yes," Mo Tiange answered calmly. In that split second just now, she decided to tell him everything. In front of a nascent soul cultivator, she couldn't hide anything. If she tried to hide this matter and angered this grandmaster, he might just take her life. So, it was better to be honest. At least, she was Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple now. If she took the initiative to give him the recipe for constitution-enhancing pills, he would have no reason to be angry with her. Constitution-enhancing pills. Qin Jinghe repeated and asked, "What are the effects of the foundation-refining pills and constitution-enhancing pills you mentioned? Where did you get them?" Mo Tiange lowered her gaze and answered honestly, "Disciple was in East Kunwa's Yunwu sect. There's a clan surnamed Jiang in Yunwu sect. This foundation-refining pill is the ancestral medicinal pill of Jiang clan. It's said that it can increase one's chances of building one's foundation. As for this constitution-enhancing pill, disciple happened to meet an aura-refining cultivator who had this pill recipe. That cultivator had a dispute with 2 other cultivators. Coincidentally, both of them were injured, so disciple obtained the pill recipe. This medicinal pill is used to enhance the effects of other medicinal pills, so disciple took it together with the foundation-building pill, hoping it could increase the efficacy of the foundation-building pill." After patiently listening to her explanation, Qin Jinghe's eyes lit up. Yes, it was the constitution-enhancing pill. 200 years ago, he also heard about the appearance of the constitution-enhancing pill recipe. However, at that time, he was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm and was unable to participate in the final fight. Later, this pill recipe disappeared and never appeared again. This child was actually so lucky to obtain this pill recipe so easily. His gaze once again fell on Mo Tiange, seemingly pondering whether her words were true or false. Mo Tiange's expression was calm. What she said was the truth. Even if he used a technique to determine whether it was true or false, she wouldn't be afraid. Qin Jinghe finally withdrew his gaze and asked faintly, "Where's the pill recipe in your hand?" Mo Tiange promptly took out a jade slip and presented it to him. "Grandmaster, this is the pill recipe for the constitution-enhancing pill." Qin Jinghe simply raised his hand, causing the jade slip in her hand to fly towards him and fall into his hand. A moment later, he revealed a happy expression. "Constitution-enhancing pill. It's really the constitution-enhancing pill. The heavens are helping me." He stood up and paced back and forth before he turned to look at Mo Tiange. With a gentle tone, he said, "Mo Tiange, you contributed by presenting the constitution-enhancing pill. What reward do you want?" Mo Tiange inwardly heaved a sigh of relief. She had gambled correctly. Although this grandmaster tyrannically took the pill recipe for himself, he also intended to give her some benefits. In that case, Mo Tiange raised her head. Her eyes revealed just the right amount of surprise, as if she didn't understand why this pill recipe was so important. However, she immediately said respectfully, "Disciple obtained this pill recipe by accident. If Grandmaster needs it, Disciple will naturally offer it to you with both hands. Grandmaster is benevolent and wants to reward Disciple, so Disciple will be bold enough to ask. Disciple doesn't know whether Disciple can ask for foundation-building pills or not. Qin Jinghe was stunned for a moment before he burst into laughter. Good, good, good. You're still the most frank one. Her answer not only showed her respect but also impolitely asked for a reward, which was indeed to his liking. She obviously wanted something, so why did she put on an act? He muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "You want foundation building pills? That's fine. The school has a rule that those who make great contributions can be awarded foundation building pills. This constitution enhancing pill is a rare miraculous spiritual medicine, so I'll give you 3 foundation building pills." Mo Tiange was overjoyed. Although she knew she would probably succeed, she didn't expect this grandmaster would be so generous as to directly give her 3 foundation building pills. She immediately kowtowed to express her gratitude. "Thank you, grandmaster." Qin Jinghe held the pill recipe. He was obviously distracted and didn't have the mood to deal with her. "You can go now. Later, I'll order someone to deliver the reward to you." "Yes, disciple will take her leave." "Wait." Mo Tiange stopped, trembling with fear. "Grandmaster, do you have any other instructions?" Qin Jinghe waved his hand. "This is an important matter. Don't mention it to others." "Yes." After leaving the cave, Mo Tiange touched her forehead and discovered it was covered in sweat. This Grandmaster Jinghe was rumored to be very easy to kill. If she hesitated and concealed it, she probably wouldn't have been able to leave this cave. However, he was also a very generous person. As long as she could win his favor, it would be very beneficial. Fortunately, she made the right bet. With 3 foundation building pills, she, who had already tried to build her foundation once, would have a very high chance of building her foundation. As for this constitution-enhancing pill recipe, although she gave it to him, she already knew how to concoct it herself. It could be said that today, not only did she not suffer any losses, but she also gained Grandmaster Jinghe's favor, which greatly benefited her. Once Mo Tiange left, Qin Jinghe, who was in the main hall, burst into laughter without any care for his image. He looked at the jade slip in his hand complacently. Constitution-enhancing pill. Constitution-enhancing pill. With this, reaching the late stage of the nascent soul realm won't be wishful thinking anymore. Every cultivator in the cultivation world knew the importance of medicinal pills to cultivators. No matter how bad a person's aptitude was, if they ate medicinal pills like food, their cultivation progress wouldn't be much worse than those who were extremely talented but didn't accept medicinal pills. Unfortunately, the cost of medicinal pills wasn't something everyone could afford. Aura refining cultivators had it easier since medicinal pills weren't too expensive. The most common aura nourishing pill used by aura refining cultivators only cost 2 spirit stones. Therefore, if aura refining cultivators could cultivate in peace and had a certain amount of financial resources, most of them could cultivate until the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. However, if their cultivation level advanced by a large level, the cost of medicinal pills would increase by almost 100-fold. A basic medicinal pill used by foundation building cultivators, soul strengthening pills, cost 300 spirit stones. Therefore, most foundation building cultivators were stuck in the early stage of the foundation building realm. As for the core formation and nascent soul realms, it was even more awkward. Spiritual plants were hard to find and medicinal pills were hard to concoct. They often didn't have many medicinal pills to take in a year, so it was extremely difficult for them to cultivate only by absorbing spiritual aura. For aura refining cultivators, constitution-enhancing pills weren't very useful because they only took basic medicinal pills like aura-nourishing pills and aura-converging pills. If they took constitution-enhancing pills at the same time, they simply wouldn't be able to afford them. However, if they were given to core formation and nascent soul cultivators, they would be very useful. They could only take a few medicinal pills in a year, and the ingredients for constitution-enhancing pills weren't difficult for them. If every medicinal pill they took had a constitution-enhancing pill to increase its efficacy, the effects would be equivalent to having many more medicinal pills. The medicinal pills taken by nascent soul cultivators were all miraculous and spiritual pills. Qin Jinghe quickly calmed down and sent out a summoning talisman. A moment later, Qin Shi hurried over. As soon as he entered, he received the jade slip Qin Jinghe threw at him. For a moment, Qin Shi was puzzled. "Master, why did you call me here?" Qin Jinghe raised his chin and said proudly, "Take a look at this pill recipe." Puzzled, Qin Shi probed it with his divine sense. In the next second, he was gobsmacked. This. Where did this come from? Qin Jinghe finally burst into laughter. It was given to me by my newly accepted registered disciple. What do you think? How could this be? How come I didn't know about this? Qin Jinghe sat back on the dragon couch and said absent-mindedly, maybe she simply doesn't know how important this thing is. Alright, quickly concoct this constitution-enhancing pill. After a while, I'll enter closed-door meditation. Qin Shi thought about it but didn't say anything. He didn't believe that Mo Tiange didn't know the importance of constitution-enhancing pills. She probably knew how important they were, so she didn't say anything. Master, Qin Shi thought for a moment then asked, what benefits did you give her? Qin Jinghe raised 3 fingers. 3 foundation-building pills. How about it? It's worth it, right? For other people, foundation-building pills were invaluable, but for nascent soul cultivators, they weren't worth anything at all. I understand. Qin Shi put away the pill recipe and looked pensive. Chapter 102. Mo Tiange stared blankly at the 3 foundation-building pills rolling around on the tray. Soon after she presented the pill recipes, someone sent her a reward. It wasn't just the 3 foundation-building pills she promised, but there were also other treasures, medicinal pills, and spirit stones. The next day, another disciple sent her some things, including a bottle of freshly concocted constitution-enhancing pills of much better quality than hers. This time, it was an order from Martial Uncle Shoujing. In fact, these 2 rewards were more valuable than all of her belongings, so she didn't feel uncomfortable about the pill recipes being taken away. At least, the 2 people from Qin clan didn't take them by force and treated her really well. After thinking about it for a while, she packed up her things and walked towards Martial Uncle Xuanin's cave. She used her identity tablet to open the outermost formation. After being informed by a disciple guarding the door, Mo Tiange walked into the hall of Master Daoist Xuanin's cave. Wei Jiasi was also there, but she was expressionless when she saw her. Mo Tiange didn't mind and saluted Martial Uncle Xianin. Disciple Mo Tiange greets Martial Uncle Xianin. Master Daoist Xianin said with a kind expression, "Stand up." "Thank you, Martial Uncle." Mo Tiange stood up and saluted Wei Jiasi. "Senior Martial Sister Wei." Wei Jiasi's expression was indifferent. She responded coldly then turned around to avoid looking at Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange didn't get angry. She just stood there obediently with her hands clasped. Master Daoist Xianin looked at her and asked gently, "Tiange, did you come here for something?" "Yes," Mo Tiange said with her head lowered. 2 days ago, disciple was bestowed foundation-building pills by Patriarch Jinghe, so disciple came to ask Martial Uncle whether disciple can immediately enter closed-door meditation. This. Master Daoist Xianin pondered for a moment then asked, "You've been in closed-door meditation for half a year. Do you feel tired?" Mo Tiange shook her head. Disciple doesn't feel tired at all. I'm wholeheartedly thinking about building my foundation. Master Daoist Xianin said, normally, aura-refining cultivators with unstable minds shouldn't enter closed-door meditation for more than half a year, let alone enter closed-door meditation continuously. However, your mind is firm, so there shouldn't be any problems. If you want to enter closed-door meditation right now, that's fine. But to build your foundation, you have to be calm and your spiritual aura is unobstructed. Mo Tiange said happily, in that case, disciple will continue her closed-door meditation tomorrow. With a smile on his face, Master Daoist Xianin nodded and said, "You already know the steps to building your foundation, so there's no need to report to me." You can decide on your own. Yes, disciple will take his leave. With his permission, Mo Tiange once again immersed herself in closed-door meditation, preparing to break through to the foundation-building realm. She still had one foundation-refining pill left from Jiang Qingxian. Last time, she only managed to concoct 2 constitution-enhancing pills and used one. Fortunately, among the things Martial Uncle Shoujing sent her, there was a bottle of constitution-enhancing pills she had just concocted. Once everything was ready, Mo Tiange informed Luo Fengxue and Yi Jingguan, who could be considered her friends, that she was going to enter closed-door meditation again. Yi Jingguan rushed over before she entered closed-door meditation and warned her in detail. Luo Fengxue promised to take good care of her medicinal fields while she was in closed-door meditation. Once all the chores were taken care of, Mo Tiange once again closed the cave. Perhaps to other people, entering closed-door meditation to build her foundation only a few days after failing to build her foundation might be a bit too impatient, but Mo Tiange was very calm. In fact, during the last 3 months of her closed-door meditation, she already knew she failed to build her foundation. However, she still used the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill to cleanse the spiritual aura in her body, so she didn't feel impatient. With a calm mind, Mo Tiange closed her eyes and once again immersed herself in the world of cultivation. The peaks of Mount Taikang were full of spiritual aura. This place was right next to Master Daoist Xuanin's Immortal's Cave, so the spiritual aura here was even more overflowing. Mo Tiange slowly operated the spiritual aura in her body. Starting from her dantian, the spiritual aura flowed through her meridians and finally returned to her dantian. Next to her, the spiritual aura gathered bit by bit and rushed into her body, gradually submerging into her meridians. The Yin spiritual aura inside her body circulated smoothly. Although she absorbed a lot of spiritual aura, it didn't increase in the slightest. The spiritual aura circulated through her body once before gradually dissipating. The peak stage of the aura refining realm meant that if she didn't build her foundation, her cultivation level wouldn't increase anymore. Nevertheless, she wasn't anxious at all. She just slowly controlled her spiritual aura, moving it in a big circle over and over again until her whole body became accustomed to this kind of repeated cycle. She didn't know how much time had passed, but she felt as if her whole body had become a universe. She began to swallow the auxiliary medicinal pills one by one, and finally, the first foundation-building pill. The spiritual aura inside her body once again skyrocketed, and her meridians cracked inch by inch. However, this time, her expression didn't change in the slightest. She still steadily followed her original pace, controlling the world inside her body bit by bit, absolutely not changing because of external factors. That powerful force gradually dissolved into the Yin spiritual aura and was even assimilated step by step. When this spiritual aura gradually weakened, she almost didn't think twice and once again swallowed a foundation-building pill and a constitution-enhancing pill at the same time. The 2 divine senses paying attention to her were both startled. They almost wanted to order her to stop immediately, but when they saw that she was still calmly operating her spiritual aura, they finally gave up. If the first foundation-building pill was like a gale blowing inside her body, then this time, it was like a monstrous wave surging to the sky. These waves came crashing down, hitting her meridians solidly, but she remained motionless. She did not block them, but rather merged herself into them, drifting along with them. She waited until she gradually grasped the pulse within, then slowly seized control of her own body. After she took the 3rd foundation-building pill and the constitution-enhancing pill, the gradually calming waves turned into overflowing seawater that washed away everything, drowned everything, and completely surrounded the Yin spiritual aura as if it wanted to swallow it whole. However, she still calmly and persistently operated this weak spiritual aura, slowly driving it and slowly swallowing it. After an unknown amount of time, this spiritual aura was finally swallowed and turned into a huge river, gradually widening her meridians. In the end, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, it rushed towards her dantian. At this moment, a strange scene appeared in Clear Spring Peak. Countless spiritual aura, as if it was being pulled, rushed towards a certain place. Countless Clear Spring Peak disciples came out of their immortals' caves and saw this spiritual aura turning from invisible to tangible until it converged at a certain place. Several clouds leisurely floated over and stopped above that immortals' cave. They intertwined with the spiritual aura, gradually interweaving to form a rainbow bridge. Core formation. Someone has formed her gold core. A disciple who had seen his sex elders form their gold core shouted, attracting the attention of other disciples. Spiritual aura converged, and auspicious clouds loomed. One after another, the core formation elders of Mount Taikang also came out of their immortals' caves to observe this scene. Clear Spring Peak was filled with people. Countless people rushed towards the immortals' cave located halfway up the mountain. At this time, a person appeared in midair. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked at the crowd below and shouted, "Disciples of Clear Spring Peak, return to your immortals' caves. No delays." His voice was clear and melodious as if it was right next to their ears. When the disciples saw the figure standing in midair, they saluted and obeyed his order. Nevertheless, they still started discussing in twos and threes. Junior Marshall Brother Shojing. Core formation cultivators from other peaks rushed over and asked, "What's going on? It seems like someone formed his gold core, but his momentum is somewhat lacking. Could it be that the disciples of your Clear Spring Peak are practicing some kind of secret technique?" Qin Shi answered faintly, "Senior Marshall Brothers, you don't need to be surprised. A disciple of my Clear Spring Peak is just building his foundation." Building his foundation? These cultivators were even more surprised when they heard the answer. How can a foundation building trigger a celestial phenomenon and a spiritual aura vortex appear? I'm still paying attention to this matter. If there's any news, I'll tell you in detail. This isn't normal. Master Daoist Xianin flew over and greeted the core formation cultivators surrounding Qin Shi. He then said with a heavy voice, "Senior Marshall Brothers and Junior Marshall Brothers, Junior Marshall Brother Shojing and I will pay close attention to this matter. You should go back first to avoid causing panic among the disciples." His words finally made the core formation cultivators stop asking questions. After a short discussion, they left on their own. Qin Shi and Master Daoist Xianin landed in front of Mo Tianga's immortals' cave. Both of them had grave expressions on their faces. "Junior Marshall Brother Shojing, in your opinion, why is this happening?" Qin Shi was silent for a long time before he slowly said, "Several hundred years ago, a spiritual beast from the distant past era awakened in a 10,000-year-old glacier. At that time, auspicious clouds gathered in the sky and thunder rumbled like a celebration." Master Daoist Xianin was startled. "You mean?" Qin Shi shook his head. "I'm not sure. However, a spiritual beast from the distant past era that looked ordinary was able to trigger such a celestial phenomenon. Presumably, it's because of the difference in their realms." Master Daoist Xianin pondered for a long time, but he still didn't understand. Even if that's the case, the cultivation technique she practices is from the present era. It has nothing to do with the distant past era. Qin Shi didn't continue to talk about this matter. He only said, "Let's wait and see. When she comes out of her closed-door meditation, we'll know what's going on." However, the amount of time they had to wait exceeded their expectations. Half a year had passed, but Mo Tianga still hadn't come out of her closed-door meditation. She was like a silkworm spinning a cocoon, sitting cross-legged in her immortal's cave without any awareness. The immortal's cave was filled with spiritual aura that had almost turned into liquid, while her surroundings were densely wrapped with Yi's spiritual aura. Layer by layer, the Yi's spiritual aura almost solidified and wrapped her tightly. A year had passed, and Master Daoist Xianin was already somewhat impatient. Cultivators usually needed several months to half a year to build their foundation. When the celestial phenomenon erupted, Mo Tianga had already been in closed-door meditation for almost half a year. In total, she had been in closed-door meditation for a whole year and a half. No one in Xianqing school had ever needed such a long time to build their foundation. A year and a half had passed. Even the head Grand Supreme Elder of the school had come to ask why this disciple had needed such a long time to build her foundation. 2 years had passed. Qin Shi stood in front of the Immortal's cave in silence. In the beginning, they could still use their divine senses to investigate the situation inside the Immortal's cave, but later, it seemed as if there was a dense layer of spiritual aura inside that even the divine senses of core formation cultivators like them couldn't penetrate. Now, they simply didn't know what the situation inside was like. They could only vaguely feel that the person inside was still alive. During a foundation building process, bystanders absolutely couldn't disturb them. Otherwise, at best, they would be seriously injured. At worst, their cultivation levels would regress. When he was free, he came here to stand for a while, but he didn't know when the door of the Immortal's cave would open. He raised his head and looked at the clouds above. The spiritual aura above condensed into a rainbow bridge with spiritual birds flying in the air. It was as beautiful as a fairyland. All of a sudden, the rainbow bridge moved. In an instant, the clouds and fog dispersed, and the spiritual birds flew up, disappearing without a trace. It was as if the scene just now was an illusion. His brows twitched. He turned his head and stared at the stone door in front of him. The spiritual aura inside the Immortal's cave was also rapidly dissipating. In less than a quarter of an hour, it had completely dispersed. Almost none of the disciples of Clear Spring Peak noticed that the scenery that had been there for more than a year had quietly disappeared. The stone door finally opened. A person slowly walked out with a smile on his face. Chapter 103. Clear Spring Peak disciple Mo Tiange, Lord Daoist Jinghe's registered disciple, advanced to the foundation building realm at the age of 23. After recording these words in the disciple register, the foundation building cultivator in charge of the school administration handed her a jade tablet and said with a smile, "Congratulations on advancing to the foundation building realm, Junior Marshal Sister Mo. This is your new tablet." Mo Tiange took it and said politely, "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother." The foundation building cultivator explained in detail, since Junior Marshal Sister advanced to the foundation building realm, you can change the tools in your Immortal's cave. However, you're Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple, so your Immortal's cave isn't managed by the Steward's Hall. Junior Marshal Sister, please ask your master about this matter. As for the tools, you can get them together. Junior Marshal Sister, take the tablet and go to the back hall to find Steward Lu. Thank you. Mo Tiange went to the back hall, found a steward, and took some clothes and tools before leaving the steward's hall. Holding the foundation building disciple's tablet, Mo Tiange looked up at the sky and felt like she was dreaming. Even with 3 foundation building pills, she wasn't sure she could build her foundation. She just tried her best with faith, and fortunately, she succeeded. With her spiritual aura circulating, her body seemed weightless and she flew steadily in the air. Aura refining disciples could only use light body techniques and some spirit tools that could increase their speed. They couldn't use flying magic tools or fly for long periods of time, so they were only a bit stronger than mortals. Foundation building cultivators, on the other hand, had enough spiritual aura to operate flying magic tools and fly in the air. No wonder people said foundation building was the real threshold of cultivation. Because riding a sword and flying thousands of miles in a flash was the real means of immortals. A cool breeze blew in her face, and the mountains and rivers were all in her sight. She stood in the air and thought, if second uncle knew, he'd be very happy, right? She finally built her foundation and crossed the threshold of cultivation. In the future, she would walk step by step until she reached the core formation realm, the nascent soul realm, and even ascended. Although she didn't know which step she could reach, she would persist until the last moment. With a faint smile, she slowly flew back to her cave. As soon as she came out of her closed-door meditation in her cave, she saw Qin Shi. When she found out she actually spent more than 2 years in closed-door meditation, and when she learned she actually triggered a celestial phenomenon similar to core formation, she was even more shocked. She really didn't think her foundation building could be compared to core formation. Aside from the longer time it took, there was no other difference in the process. After she built her foundation building, the spiritual aura inside her body also didn't have any abnormalities, so how could it have triggered celestial phenomena? It should be noted that only those who advanced to the core formation stage or above could trigger celestial phenomena. Those who advanced to the foundation building stage could, at most, cause some fluctuations of spiritual energy. She just told her not to think too much about it. Martial Uncle Xianin happened to be in closed-door meditation these past few days, so she had to deal with some chores first and wait for Martial Uncle Xianin to finish his closed-door meditation before going to see him. Mo Tiange changed her identity tablet, took a new set of sect clothes and some foundation building rewards. She also thanked Yi Jingwen and Luo Fengxue for taking care of her for the past 2 years before returning to her cave. In any case, it was a fact that she had reached the foundation building stage. She should properly think about some matters in the future. The first problem was the cultivation method. She originally practiced the art of Sunu and greenwood art. Although greenwood art could be practiced until the core formation realm, it was very difficult for it to display its full power against foundation building cultivators. Her purpose in practicing greenwood art was to make up for the art of Sunu's lack of power in fights of magical powers, so she might as well give up on it. However, if she gave up on the greenwood spell, she would have to learn a new divine power to use in fights of magical powers. The second problem was magic tools. Aura refining cultivators used spirit tools while foundation building cultivators used magic tools. Compared to spirit tools, magic tools were usually 10 times more powerful. Now that she had built her foundation, she naturally had to change all her spirit tools into magic tools. In fact, she also had a lot of magic tools. Most of them were left behind by second uncle. Some of them were awarded to her by Grandmaster Jinghe and Martial Uncle Shoujing before she built her foundation. The other 2 magic tools were the Heaven and Earth Cloud Silk Armor and the Land Fleeing Ruler. When she left Mount Yunwu, she stole them in passing and gave them to her. However, although she had a lot of magic tools, most of them were auxiliary and defensive types. Second uncle's magic tools weren't suitable for her, so she could only look for other magic tools. In addition, her Qinquan bag still contained the carcass of the second-rank iron-teethed crocodile she killed in Yunwu. In the future, she could take it and ask someone to make it into a magic tool. The last problem was medicinal pills. Foundation building medicinal pills weren't as easy to obtain as aura refining medicinal pills. Even though she was now an elite disciple, it was still impossible for her to eat them like before. Before she could figure out how to solve this problem, Luo Fengxue told her that Martial Uncle Xianin already came out of his closed-door meditation. Mo Tiange temporarily put these matters aside and went to see him first. Upon entering Martial Uncle Xianin's Immortal's Cave, Mo Tiange discovered that this time, everyone was present. Not only were the 2 senior martial sisters present, but several senior martial brothers were also present. These senior martial brothers were very diligent in their cultivation. Mo Tiange had been at Xianqing school for a long time, but she still hadn't met some of them. Disciple Mo Tiange greets Martial Uncle Xianin. Master Daoist Xianin was still smiling. He raised his hand and said, "Stand up." Mo Tiange stood up and said respectfully, "Disciple finished building her foundation and came to report to Martial Uncle." Master Daoist Xianin nodded with a smile. "I already know. You're very good. Come forward and let me take a look." "Yes." Mo Tiange walked forward. Master Daoist Xianin reached out and held her pulse. A wisp of spiritual aura instantly entered her body and examined her meridians one by one. After a long time, Master Daoist Xianin released her hand with a slight frown on his face. Mo Tiange, who was a bit worried, asked cautiously, "Martial Uncle, is there a problem?" Master Daoist Xianin shook his head and said, "There's no problem at all. You already know about the phenomenon that occurred when you built your foundation, right?" "Yes." "Then, did you feel it yourself?" Mo Tiange shook her head. Disciple lost consciousness after that. I basically didn't know it took me 2 years. So that's what happened. Master Daoist Xianin pondered for a moment but didn't say anything. He said to her, "Let's talk about this later." Yes. Seeing that martial uncle Xianin had something to deal with, Mo Tiange obediently stood to the side without saying anything else. Qingyu. Upon hearing her name being called, Han Qingyu stood up and said, "Master. This is an important matter. Take several junior martial brothers and sisters with you. If there's nothing, that's fine. If there's something, quickly come back and report to me." "I understand, Master." Master Daoist Xianin then turned towards the other disciples. He stroked his beard and muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "Shernan, Qifeng, Xia, the 3 of you follow eldest martial sister." "Yes, Master." "All right, you can all go back." "Tiange, you stay." "Yes, martial uncle." As she watched her fellow disciples leaving one by one, Mo Tiange muttered inwardly. Could it be that something big happened? Martial uncle Xianin actually sent 4 disciples at once? She didn't have much time to think because Master Daoist Xianin already said to her, "Tiange, although you're not my disciple, you respect me as your master. Now that you've built your foundation, martial uncle will naturally give you some rewards." Mo Tiange said, "Disciple was able to build my foundation thanks to martial uncle's guidance. I don't dare to ask for any rewards." Master Daoist Xianin stroked his beard and said with a smile, "You don't need to refuse. Every disciple who builds their foundation will get a reward, not just you." After pondering for a moment, he continued to say, "Let me ask you, is the cultivation technique you practice inferior in fights of magical power after building your foundation?" Mo Tiange was slightly shocked. As expected of a core formation cultivator. She hadn't even said anything, but he already sensed it. She answered, "Yes, martial uncle's eyes are like torches. I practice 2 cultivation techniques. One of them is beneficial for cultivation, but it doesn't have any great divine power. As for the other one, its power is greatly reduced after building my foundation." Master Daoist Xianin nodded slightly and stood up. "That being the case, I'll pick a cultivation technique for you. Come with me." "Yes, martial uncle." Mo Tiange followed Master Daoist Xianin out of the hall. After making many turns and passing through some restrictions, they finally entered a small collection room. As soon as they entered the collection room, Mo Tiange saw several wooden shelves with many books, jade slips, and the like on them. Master Daoist Xianin said, "Martial uncle has never seen a female cultivator with a pure Yin constitution, so I don't know the characteristics of the cultivation technique you practice. I can't pick the most suitable cultivation technique for you, so I can only pick a few roughly." Mo Tiange lowered her head and said, "Martial uncle is so attentive. Disciple is overwhelmed by the favor." Master Daoist Xianin had a very good impression of this junior's politeness, so he didn't say anything more. After pondering for a while, he picked several books and jade slips and handed them to her. "Take a look. What do you think of these?" Mo Tiange took them and carefully looked at them. These were all cultivation techniques for fights of magical power. They didn't require special cultivation and didn't have high requirements for spiritual roots. However, the shortcoming was that they weren't very powerful and would be useless once one reached the core formation realm. Nevertheless, since this martial uncle put them in the collection room, they certainly weren't ordinary cultivation techniques. The most important thing was that they were suitable for her. Mo Tiange hesitated for a while before she raised her head and asked, "Martial uncle Xianin, do you have any cultivation techniques that can be used with magic tools?" Disciple feels that if we only talk about power, perhaps that one would be a bit stronger. Master Daoist Xianin nodded. "What you said is very reasonable. Regarding magic tools, junior martial brother Shoujing asked me to give them to you. Since you asked, I'll give them to you first." As he spoke, Master Daoist Xianin took out an object from his Qinkuan bag and held it in his hand. This object is called the Shuttle of Flying Apsara. It's a shape-shifting object and contains an illusory formation. However, using this object isn't a cultivation technique but a formation. Since you're good at formations, I presume it's suitable for you. Mo Tienga took a closer look at the shuttle of flying Apsara. The shuttle of flying Apsara had two pointed ends and was made of an unknown material. Although it was only the size of a palm, it was brimming with spiritual aura, so it was certainly not an ordinary object. Master Daoist Xianin gave the shuttle of flying Apsara and a jade slip to her. Although you have this object, you still have to choose a cultivation technique for fights of magical powers. Otherwise, if you rely too much on magic tools, you'll be at the mercy of others. How about this? Martial Uncle will make the decision on your behalf. This soul-refining art cultivates the primordial spirit, so it's extremely powerful. I originally thought this technique was difficult to practice and wasn't suitable for you, but since you're determined to cultivate magic tools first, I'll give it to you to practice slowly. This cultivation technique isn't easy to practice and can easily lead to cultivation deviation, so I don't dare to give it to other disciples. However, since you have a pure Yin constitution, the chances of you suffering from cultivation deviation are lower than others, so presumably, it won't be too big of a problem. Yes, Martial Uncle. Mo Tienga accepted the other cultivation technique Master Daoist Xianin gave her. After skimming through it, she was immediately overjoyed. This cultivation technique clearly stated that one could only practice it after they built their foundation. Moreover, it could be practiced until the nascent soul realm. It was a high-level cultivation technique. If she practiced it diligently, it would definitely become her trump card. After leading Mo Tienga out of the collection room, Master Daoist Xianin gave her a flying sword and a bottle of medicinal pills. He said, "Since your martial uncle Shoujing already gave you magic tools, I'll give you a flying sword. As for this medicinal pill, it's a soul-strengthening pill for foundation-building cultivators. It's your disciple's portion, 1 bottle every year. Foundation-building medicinal pills are much rarer than aura-refining medicinal pills, so I hope you treasure them well." Chapter 104. Mo Tienga stared at the shuttle of flying Apsara in her hand. It was similar to the shuttles used to weave cloth in the secular world, but it was a bit bigger. It was thick and round in the middle and pointed at both ends. She didn't know where it was made from, but it shone with a golden light and was impervious to heat and cold. A rustling sound came from the forest, and a first-rank spiritual beast appeared in front of her in a daze. Mo Tienga smiled. This little thing really came at the right time. She raised her hand, and the shuttle of flying Apsara turned into a golden light that soared into the sky. The small spirit beast that resembled a squirrel raised its head and stared at the flashing golden light with its beady black eyes. To its surprise, it discovered that the streak of golden light had transformed into hundreds of tiny golden streaks that were arranged in a circular formation around it. The little spiritual beast seemed to have just realized the danger. It shrank its head, swung its tail, and turned around, wanting to jump away. However, the countless golden rays had already sealed off all of its escape routes. No matter how it tried to jump, it couldn't escape. The little guy was anxious. It bared its teeth and clapped its hands. A scorching hot spiritual energy rushed out and actually caused the golden rays to tremble. Mo Tienga was stunned. She pressed her hand down, and the golden light scattered and gathered again, pressing down on the little fellow. No matter how the little fellow struggled, it couldn't jump out. When it finally felt a bit tired, Mo Tienga shook her hand and tied it up with a rope. She withdrew the shuttle of flying Apsara, walked forward, and picked up the little spiritual beast. The little spiritual beast bared its teeth at her and struggled angrily. Mo Tienga didn't care at all. She rummaged through her Qingquan bag, took out a spiritual beast bag, and put it inside. Once she was done, she released her flying sword and flew back to her cave on Clear Spring Peak. Originally, she just wanted to test the power of the shuttle of flying Apsara, but she unexpectedly caught an interesting little thing. This little thing obviously knew a very advanced fire element spell. Although its power wasn't great, it wasn't ordinary fire. Mo Tiange landed outside her cave and happened to see Luo Fengxue coming back. She called out, "Senior Martial Sister Luo." Luo Fengxue wiped her face and came over. "Tiange, did you go out?" Mo Tiange nodded, opened her cave, and let Luo Fengxue in. Luo Fengxue, who looked exhausted, walked into her cave and sat motionlessly on a stone chair. Mo Tiange carefully looked at her expression and asked, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, what's wrong?" With great difficulty, Luo Fengxue lifted her spirits and sighed. "I've been busy for more than 10 days. I haven't rested." Mo Tiange was surprised. Mo Tiange knew Luo Fengxue wasn't an ascetic cultivator. Instead, she was passionate about management. After she built her foundation, she was promoted to steward of the steward's hall. But she knew that deacons didn't have to be busy every single day, and all the minor matters were handled by deacons and disciples, and she only had to oversee the deacon's hall on normal days. So what could possibly make her so busy? Senior Martial Sister Luo, did something big happen in the sect? Luo Fengxue rubbed her brows and said weakly, "Do you still remember when eldest martial sister took several senior martial brothers and sisters out of the sect a month ago?" Fengxue said. It was something that happened when she went to see martial uncle Xianin after she built her foundation. At that time, martial uncle Xianin asked her eldest martial sister, Han Xingyu, to take her 3 senior martial brothers and sisters with her. Mo after her, she said, went and, she and went. A few months ago, there seemed to be some movement in the southern forest. Eldest senior sister and the others went to investigate, but after they left, there was no news of them. What? Mo Tiange was astonished. Luo Fengxue nodded. Eldest martial sister and the others aren't the only ones who went missing. This time, other disciples sent by martial uncles and martial uncles from other peaks also disappeared without a trace. Even though Mo Tiange wasn't involved in the matters of the school, she knew how important this matter was. The 17 foundation building cultivators were all elite disciples. If all of them died, it would be a big loss even for a large cultivation group like Xianqing School. Although there were more than 500 foundation establishment cultivators in the sect, they were the cream of the crop. They were the ones with the highest possibility of reaching core formation. Over the past dozen or so days, we've contacted the other sects, and we discovered that the other 6 great system-allocated sects are also in the same situation. Only then did everyone realize that this matter is not as simple as it seems. Luo Fengxue rubbed her reddened eyes, then said to Mo Tiange, "Tiange, you don't have to worry. This matter will be handled by the sect's elders, so it won't affect us. All right, I'll go take a rest first. That's all for now. And rest well, senior martial sister." Luo Fengxue waved her hand and returned to her immortal's cave while rubbing her eyes. Mo Tiange didn't think too much about it. Just like Luo Fengxue said, this kind of matter didn't need them, foundation building disciples, to worry about. The elders would handle it. She opened the spiritual beast bag and released the little spiritual beast. Once the little thing came out of the spiritual beast bag, it blinked its black eyes and stared at her as if it was begging. Mo Tiange then pulled the rope that was tied to its body away. Once the little thing regained its freedom, it immediately turned around and ran towards the entrance of the cave. Mo Tiange raised her hand, and the shuttle of flying Apsara was launched once again. A golden light enveloped it completely. Woo-woo. The little thing knew how powerful the shuttle of flying Apsara was, so it immediately turned around and begged for mercy. Mo Tiange retrieved the shuttle of flying Apsara and said, "If you don't run, I won't tie you up." The little thing seemed to understand her words. It sat with its hind legs together and put its 2 front legs together, making a begging gesture. Mo Tiange couldn't help but find it funny. She opened her hand and retrieved the shuttle of flying Apsara. The little thing stared at the stone door reluctantly, but in the end, it still slowly slipped back. Spiritual beasts were quite sensitive to dangerous things, and this little thing could naturally feel it. Mo Tianga's strength was far superior to it, so it couldn't run away and could only submit. Seeing that the little thing was obedient, Mo Tianga waved her hand. It had glossy brown fur, shiny black eyes, and a very large tail. It looked a bit like a squirrel, but Mo Tianga recognized it. It was a small spiritual beast called the Inferno Beast. This kind of spiritual beast generally couldn't cultivate to a very high level, but it was born with fire techniques. Its fire wasn't ordinary fire, but ardent young real fire. It was a kind of innate real fire that was even purer than the Dantian real fire of foundation building cultivators. It was excellent for concocting medicinal pills and refining tools. Mo Tianga picked the little thing up, stroked its fur and said, "Be good, and I'll help you cultivate. If I form my gold core one day, I'll let you go." The little thing's eyes brightened as it stared at her. "Looks like you agree." Mo Tianga smiled and put it on the ground. She took out a few aura-nourishing pills she no longer had any use for it and gave them to it. "I'll give you a name. Since you're an inferno beast, I'll call you Xiaohua." The little thing swallowed the aura-nourishing pills in one gulp, then raised its head and let out two woo-woo sounds as if it was protesting her completely uncreative name. Mo Tianga smiled, completely unmoved. "I didn't ask whether you agree or not. In any case, you'll be called Xiaohua. Come here, you'll live here from now on. You can play in the small valley behind, but you're not allowed to make trouble. If you're not obedient, I'll put you in the spiritual beast bag." The little thing let out two woo-woo sounds again. Mo Tianga patted it and gave it a few more aura-nourishing pills. She put it in the spiritual beast room and returned to the cultivation room to meditate. Only after entering the foundation building realm did she realize how useless her spiritual roots were. When she was in the aura refining realm, she ate medicinal pills in the spirit gathering formation, so her cultivation didn't grow any slower than elite disciples. But now that she was in the foundation building realm, even if she took medicinal pills, her progress wouldn't be as obvious as when she was in the aura refining realm. This month, she couldn't cultivate properly, so the growth of her spiritual aura was minimal, so she had to stop. If she continued to cultivate at this speed, even if she used up the remaining 300 years of her lifespan, she still wouldn't be able to form her gold core. Therefore, when she saw this inferno beast, she was tempted. As it turned out, she concocted medicinal pills only for the sake of constitution-enhancing pills. Now that the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pills had been given to Grandmaster Jinghe and Martial Uncle Shoujing sent her a bottle of constitution-enhancing pills every once in a while, she originally planned to give up on concocting medicinal pills. But now that she realized her aptitude was so useless, she had no choice but to pick up her pill concocting skills. Mo Tianga sighed, then closed her eyes and began to cultivate. She already tested the power of the shuttle of flying Apsara. Martial Uncle Xianin said this thing could transform and contain an illusory formation. Indeed, this thing could attack and defend. It was indeed a first-class magic tool. In addition, Martial Uncle Xianin repeatedly warned her about the soul-refining art, telling her to cultivate it slowly and not to rush it. Although cultivating the soul-refining art was very risky, it was indeed very powerful. The soul-refining art was a cultivation technique that specialized in cultivating primordial spirits. It could directly launch attacks against primordial spirits, which had always been the weakest part of cultivators. If she succeeded in cultivating it, the power of this cultivation technique would be extraordinary. Primordial spirits were, in fact, what mortals referred to as souls. Humans were born with souls, but cultivators cultivated their bodies and souls, eventually forming their primordial spirits. Divine sense was derived from primordial spirits. Under normal circumstances, primordial spirits were hidden deep in the sea of knowledge in the Dantian, so divine sense couldn't attack them. On the contrary, it was easy to be injured. Ordinary cultivation techniques also strengthened divine sense, but they only made divine sense more sensitive and covered a wider area. This soul-refining art, on the other hand, cultivated primordial spirits so that divine sense would have the power to attack. Mo Tianga didn't dare to say there weren't other cultivation techniques that cultivated primordial spirits, but she was certain that very few people cultivated them. The reason was very simple. It was precisely because of the risk of suffering from qi deviation, as martial uncle Xianin said. Every cultivator knew how fragile primordial spirits were. When cultivating primordial spirits, if one didn't grasp the right amount, it was very likely that one's primordial spirit would be damaged, resulting in serious injuries. If it was a nascent soul cultivator, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, nascent soul cultivators had fused their primordial spirit and gold core into one, forming their nascent soul, so their primordial spirits wouldn't be that fragile. However, for cultivators below the core formation realm, if their primordial spirits were damaged, their cultivation levels would greatly regress. Because of this, martial uncle Xianin didn't give her this cultivation technique from the very beginning. Later on, he even repeatedly warned her not to be greedy. However, other people were other people. Mo Tiange, who cultivated this soul-refining art, had a few advantages compared to others: her pure yin constitution and originally extremely poor aptitude. Pure yin constitution meant that yin and yang wouldn't clash, and spiritual roots of the origin could balance each other out. The so-called qi deviation occurred when one cultivated a cultivation technique that destroyed the balance inside their body. Mo Tiange had a pure yin constitution, so she wouldn't have any yin and yang imbalance. Furthermore, she also had spiritual roots of the origin, so there was a small circulation inside her body. Because of that, she could be said to be blessed by nature when she practiced this technique. As long as she wasn't greedy and was cautious, the possibility of her qi deviation was very small. However, cultivating this technique was really not easy. Cultivating primordial spirits naturally had to start with the primordial spirit, but primordial spirits were extremely fragile, so they could only be strengthened slowly. Mo Tiange had been cultivating for about a month, but she still hadn't made any progress. Her cultivation level hadn't advanced, and she didn't have a clue about the cultivation technique either. Mo Tiange realized that after entering the foundation building realm, her future was very bleak. Chapter 105. The Inferno Beast was a kind of spiritual beast that was easy to raise. It didn't need special food or a good environment, it could be raised casually. This kind of small spiritual beast wasn't rare in Kunwu. Low-level cultivators liked to catch one or two to concoct medicinal pills or refine tools, so Mo Tiange wasn't worried about how to raise it. After catching the little Inferno Beast, Mo Tiange raised it in the spiritual beast room and in the small valley behind her cave. In any case, there weren't many things in her cave, and the medicinal fields in the valley were also covered with restrictions. At most, the little fellow could only gnaw on the turf and wouldn't cause much trouble. When it was hungry, she fed it with aura pills. When it was thirsty, there was a spring in the valley. Moreover, without any natural enemies, the little fellow grew round very quickly. After a month, she had some clues about the soul-refining art, and the Inferno Beast no longer had any resistance towards her, so Mo Tiange started to concoct medicinal pills. The basic medicinal pills for foundation-building cultivators were soul-strengthening pills. She had already concocted constitution-enhancing pills, so it wasn't difficult. However, the spiritual plants needed weren't as cheap as the medicinal pills for aura-refining cultivators. After spending several thousand spirit stones, she only bought 100 sets of raw materials. Fortunately, she now had the allowance of an elite disciple. In addition to her original several thousand spirit stones, she could afford it. After catching the Inferno Beast and bringing it to the concocting room, Mo Tiange closed her door and immersed herself in studying pill concocting. Several months passed in a hurry. One day, she suddenly heard the ringing of a bell outside. Only then did she realize that a long time had passed. Mo Tiange stopped concocting and walked out of her cave. She happened to run into Wei Jiasi, who was walking out with a worried expression. Mo Tiange stepped forward to greet her. "Senior Martial Sister Wei, what happened?" Wei Jiasi shook her head and answered faintly, "I just heard the bell, so I naturally didn't know. This bell is used to summon disciples. Disciples from every peak have to go to the main peak when they hear it. You'll know when you get there. Wei Jiaxi no longer looked at Mo Tiange and flew towards the main peak on her flying magic tool. Mo Tiange looked around. Han Xingyu hadn't returned since she disappeared, and Luo Fengshue's cave was also quiet. She was probably in the steward's hall. Mo Tiange didn't know anyone else, so she also flew towards the main peak on her flying sword. At this very moment, all the disciples on the mountain were busy, but they weren't in a mess. Disciples in the foundation building realm and above were riding their flying magic tools, while aura refining disciples were riding the 10,000 miles cloud shared by each peak, rushing towards the main peak. As Mo Tiange watched, she couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This was the demeanor of a famous and big cultivation group. These disciples suddenly encountered a problem, but they didn't panic at all. Several thousand disciples acted in an orderly manner. Presumably, even if something happened, they wouldn't be the slightest bit flustered when dealing with it. Once she arrived at the main peak, she looked down and saw that the square was already full of people. Several dozen core formation cultivators and 2 nascent soul grandmasters were standing at the entrance of the main hall of the 3 pure ones with solemn expressions on their faces. Mo Tiange quickly found the place where the foundation building disciples were standing. She landed her flying sword and stood there solemnly. There were more than 10 core formation cultivators and 2 nascent soul grandmasters. She didn't believe that nothing serious had happened. Could it be related to Senior Sister Han's disappearance? Although Mo Tiange had been concocting medicinal pills in seclusion for several months, she knew there was no news of Senior Sister Han after she disappeared. Several martial uncles left the mountain to look for her, but they didn't find any clues. She occasionally went to see Martial Uncle Xianyin, but he always looked worried. The square was gradually filled with people. When all the disciples returned to their positions, an old nascent soul Daoist who was leading the group glanced at them. A core formation cultivator stepped forward and shouted, "Disciples, be quiet." His voice wasn't very loud, but it could be heard clearly in every corner. The disciples who were originally whispering to each other immediately stopped talking. The core formation cultivator's expression was solemn. He said in a deep voice, "I summoned all the disciples here because I have something to tell you. Several months ago, there were abnormal movements of demonic beasts in the southern forest. We sent elite disciples to investigate, but unexpectedly, all of them went missing. To avoid chaos, this matter has never been announced. In the past few months, we've received news that a lot of disciples outside have gone missing, so we summoned everyone to seal the mountain." Once he said this, the square went into an uproar. Although many disciples hadn't experienced the mountain sealing order, they had heard of it. The so-called mountain sealing order was to activate the Great Mountain Protecting Formation, close the mountain gate, and no longer receive visitors. Disciples were also only allowed to enter but not leave. Apart from those who received the order, they were cut off from the outside world. Mo Tiange had been concocting medicinal pills in seclusion for several months, so Luo Fengxue rarely saw her. She actually didn't know the impact of her disappearance was so widespread. Since it could make one of the top cultivation groups in the celestial pole close their doors, it was clear how serious this matter was. At that moment, the old nascent soul Daoist standing in the middle raised his hand, and the core formation cultivator from before stepped back. Mo Tiange once heard from Luo Fengxue that this nascent soul grandmaster was the head grand supreme elder of Xianqing school, which meant he was the #1 figure in Xianqing school. Reportedly, his cultivation level was in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, and his strength was also one of the best in the celestial pole. The head grand supreme elder, whose eyes had been half closed, suddenly opened them. His sharp gaze swept over the disciples in the square. After a while, he raised his voice and said, "Disciples, do you think Xianqing School is about to encounter a formidable enemy because of the mountain sealing order?" The square was silent, but judging from everyone's expressions, this nascent soul grandmaster was obviously right. Since the school was founded, the mountain sealing order only happened once every several hundred years, and every time it happened, it was a great disaster. The old Daoist once again closed his eyes and said in a leisurely tone, "Let me tell you, it's not only Xianqing School, but all of Kunwu is currently facing another demonic beast riot. Furthermore, according to the disciples' reports, this time's demonic beast riot is extraordinary. Xianqing School can be said to be strong now, but we must understand the principle that the more prosperous it is, the easier it will fall. Being too strong will always attract disasters. For the sake of Xianqing School's disciples, the Grand Supreme Elder has decided to seal the mountain until the demonic beast riot is over. During this period, Xianqing School's disciples must obey orders and can't leave the mountain without permission. Once the head Grand Supreme Elder finished speaking, Mo Tiange glanced at the foundation building cultivators around her and found many of them were frowning. Some were worried, some were excited, and some were afraid. She had heard about the demonic beast riot in the past. Most of the cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole were built on Kunwu Mountain Range, and to the south of Kunwu Mountain Range was a boundless forest. This forest and Kunwu Mountain Range combined to form the largest spiritual land in the Celestial Pole. There were many cultivators living on the mountain, and there were many demonic spirits growing in the forest. If the cultivation level of demonic spirits was high, their intelligence would gradually be similar to that of humans. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't go out of the forest, but every once in a while, the big demonic beasts inside would order low-level demonic beasts to attack the mountains and obtain some medicinal pills, spirit tools, and the like from human cultivators to help them cultivate. Every time there was a conflict between humans and demonic beasts, it was both a calamity and an opportunity. Demonic beasts wanted to snatch medicinal pills, while humans also wanted to kill demonic beasts to obtain their beast cores or corpses. There was no justice or evil, they were just competing for what they wanted. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment and immediately understood what her fellow foundation building disciples were thinking. They were excited because this was a good opportunity. If they made a great contribution or obtained some fated chances in this matter, their cultivation levels would advance very quickly. What they were afraid of was that some people would definitely leave the mountain to carry out a mission. Foundation building disciples like them were the backbone of the mountain's strength. If there was an accident, they wouldn't even have their corpses left. Mo Tiange wasn't worried at all. In any case, she was Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple, so he definitely wouldn't send her to die for something too dangerous. Besides, she wasn't afraid. During the 7 years she wandered around with second uncle, she went everywhere and encountered danger countless times, so she didn't think there was anything to be afraid of. Alright, aura refining disciples, go back to your immortals' caves and cultivate with peace of mind. Foundation building disciples, stay. Upon hearing that, the aura refining disciples left one after another. They looked at the foundation building disciples with sympathetic and envious expressions. Once all the aura refining disciples had left, the core formation cultivator from before stepped forward. Martial nephews, many of you experienced the demonic beast riot 50 years ago, so I presume I don't need to explain it in detail. The demonic beast riot isn't something that can be resolved by sealing off the mountain. We still need to go and eliminate the enemies. Aura refining disciples haven't entered the school of immortality yet, so you foundation building disciples are the cornerstones of Xianqing School. You still need to work hard on this matter. We'll send 6 core formation cultivators and more than 100 foundation building disciples. You can go and prepare yourselves, then wait for further notice. Once he finished speaking, the core formation cultivator signaled everyone to leave. Mo Tiange was full of questions. While following the crowd back to Clear Spring Peak, she was also puzzled. Shouldn't they announce the list of disciples participating in the demon exterminating battle? Why did it end so easily? Tiange. Just as she landed on Clear Spring Peak, she heard a voice coming from behind her. She turned around and saw that it was Yi Jingwen. Big brother Yi. She looked at Yi Jingwen and saw that his expression was similar to Luo Fengshue's. He looked exhausted as if he had been busy all this time. That's not right. Yi Jingwen is the same as me, he doesn't have a job, so how could he be this tired? Yi Jingwen waved his hand, rolled up his sleeves, and walked towards the house. let's talk inside. Mo Tiange promptly opened the door to her immortal's cave and invited him inside. Once they entered, Yi Jingwen said, Tiange, in a few days, I'll be leaving the mountain to carry out a mission. Huh? Mo Tiange was shocked. Yi Jingwen was already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age and was one of the best among the elite disciples. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be sent out before the situation was clear. Big brother Yi, why were you chosen? Yi Jingwen smiled bitterly and said, it can't be helped. My master was chosen, so I can only go with him. Could it be that the people who will go have already been decided? Yi Jingwen nodded. Before this matter was announced, the martial uncles already knew about it and already decided who would leave the mountain to exterminate the demons. Each of the 6 peaks will send a core formation senior, and our Clear Spring Peak will be sent by my master, Master Daoist Qingyuan. Oh. In that case, with the master there shouldn't be any danger. As for the foundation building disciples, only a few of them are elite disciples, and most of them are ordinary disciples. You don't have to worry, they probably won't choose you. However, this matter also depends on the situation of the battle. If the situation isn't good, everyone might have to go, but if it's too good, they might send disciples like you who have just built your foundation to gain experience. I'm just here to tell you, so you have to be prepared. I understand. Seeing that she agreed, Yi Jingwen stood up without even taking a sip of tea. Alright, I'll take my leave first. Big brother Yi, you have to be careful. Yi Jingwen looked back with a smile then hurriedly left. Mo Tiange turned around and went back to her immortal's cave, her mind full of thoughts. She wasn't afraid of what Yi Jingwen said. When they left the mountain to exterminate demons, they would be led by core formation cultivators, so the danger wouldn't be too high. However, she had just advanced to the foundation building realm and couldn't use the soul refining art yet, so her methods were a bit lacking. If she really participated in the battle, she wasn't confident. Forget it, she'd better make some preparations. If it really was her turn, she wouldn't be flustered. She had to prepare some life-saving measures. Chapter 106. After feeding the little inferno beast an aura-nourishing pill, Mo Tiange looked up and saw several flight lights streaking across the sky. She pondered for a moment, then left the little inferno beast in the small valley and left the immortal's cave by herself. After the mountain was sealed, the entire Great Mountain Barrier formation of Mount Taikang was activated, leaving only 1 or 2 entrances. Those disciples who were ordered to exterminate the demons would enter and leave from those entrances. However, other than the 100 or so disciples who were ordered to leave the mountain at the beginning, there were very few people coming in and out. This light must be a message. She hadn't received any news for so many days, so when she thought of Yi Jingwen, she pondered for a while then went to the steward's hall. Before she entered the steward's hall, the 2 aura refining disciples guarding the door greeted her. Martial Uncle Mo Tiange chuckled. Now that she was in the foundation building realm, she was also a martial uncle in other people's eyes. She glanced at the steward's hall and asked, is there any news about the demonic beast riot? One of the aura refining disciples answered, Martial Uncle, are you here to inquire about the news? Mo Tiange nodded. Correct. I have an old friend among the disciples of Mount Li. May I know how he's doing now? The 2 aura refining disciples glanced at each other. One of them said, Martial Uncle, we also don't know much. We only know that the situation isn't good. Martial Uncle, you mustn't tell anyone about this, aura refining disciples still don't know about it. Yes, I know. The situation is not good. Are there any casualties? It seems so. You don't have to worry, Martial Uncle. You'll get the news from Martial Uncle Luo soon. Presumably, these 2 disciples didn't dare to reveal too much, so Mo Tiange no longer asked. Alright, thank you. Not long after Mo Tiange returned from the steward's hall, Master Daoist Xianyin sent her a message telling all disciples to go to his immortal's cave. Mo Tiange hurried over and saw that almost all of Martial Uncle Xuaning's disciples had arrived. Everyone was standing solemnly with anxious expressions on their faces. Mo Tiange quietly walked up to Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue shook her head at her and sighed softly. Mo Tiange's heart sank when she saw Mo Tiange's tired expression and worried gaze. Once all the disciples had arrived, Master Daoist Xianin finally opened his eyes. With a solemn expression, he said, "You probably know the situation with the demonic beast riot this time isn't good. I asked you to come here to tell you about this." Snow. Luo Fengxue raised her head and stepped forward. "Yes, Master." "You talk to them." Luo Fengxue responded. She then turned around with a solemn expression and said, "Senior martial brothers and sisters, today, the Steward's Hall received a message from a Mount Li disciple saying Martial Uncle Hanyu of Drifting Cloud Peak has fallen." As soon as she finished speaking, everyone's expression changed. They all knew what the death of a core formation cultivator meant. The battle this time would definitely be very intense. Next, they would definitely need to rescue him. Could it be that this time, their master, Luo Fengxue continued on, the head elder has already decided to send another group of disciples as reinforcements. The number of disciples will be similar to last time. Each peak will send one core formation cultivator, several elite disciples, and about 10 ordinary disciples. Our Clear Spring Peak has already decided that Martial Uncle Shou Jing will be going. Martial Uncle Shou Jing doesn't have any disciples, so the elite disciples will be chosen from among us. Mo Tiange was stunned. In Xianqing School, the cultivators who went to battle last time weren't too outstanding, but their cultivation levels weren't weak either. Clearly, the battle wasn't urgent. However, Martial Uncle Shou Jing was Grandmaster Jinghe's favorite disciple. His cultivation level and divine abilities were among the best among Xianqing School's core formation cultivators. Now, the battle had just started, but they already had to send him out. Apparently, the situation was very bad. What she could think of, the other disciples naturally already thought of. Those who were familiar with each other were currently discussing in low voices. Some were anxious, some were worried. "Enough," Master Daoist Xianin said, stopping the disciples from whispering to each other. "Who among you wants to go?" None of the dozen or so disciples present answered him. After a while, someone finally stepped forward and asked, "Master, isn't the current situation very critical?" Master Daoist Xianin nodded slightly. "There's no need to hide this matter from you. We received news from the outside that the casualties of the first batch of disciples we sent have reached 30%. If you go now, it'll naturally be very dangerous." After he finished speaking, his gaze swept through the disciples and he said, "Among you, those in the early stage of the foundation building realm don't need to go." Mo Tiange quickly swept her gaze around and discovered that everyone was dumbfounded. Her master actually said that those in the early stage of the foundation building realm didn't need to go. Clearly, it was extremely dangerous. Although elite disciples like them were superior to ordinary disciples in fights of magical powers, they also cherished their lives more than ordinary disciples. Asking them to volunteer was too difficult. After a long time, no one stepped forward. Master Daoist Xianin wrinkled his brows and said with displeasure, "Is there no one willing?" "Master," a crisp female voice rang out, "I'll go." Mo Tiange looked up and was stunned. It was actually her second martial sister, Wei Jiasi. Frankly speaking, Mo Tiange didn't have a very good impression of this senior martial sister Wei. Probably because her aptitude was excellent, her behavior was arrogant and she rarely looked people in the eye. Mo Tiange's keen senses told her that this senior martial sister Wei looked down on her. However, she really didn't expect that this senior martial sister Wei would be so unyielding. She was obviously willing to go to a very dangerous place. Master Daoist Xianin finally smiled as he looked at Wei Jiasi. "Jiasi, you're very good. Who else wants to go?" Mo Tiange swept her gaze over the crowd. Wei Jiasi's expression was still calm, but there seemed to be a hint of determination in her eyes. Could it be that she had a reason to go? Master, I'm also willing. Me too. After a while, 2 more disciples stepped forward. Master Daoist Xianin showed a gratified smile and said, "Good, very good. I'm very happy that you're willing to fight for the school. Everyone else can leave, but the 3 of you stay." "Yes, Master." "Tiange, let's go." After saluting Master Daoist Xianin, Luo Fengxue quietly grabbed Imo Tiange's hand and pulled her out of the cave. After leaving Master Daoist Xuanin's cave, the 2 of them walked for a while before Imo Tiange asked, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, is the situation really that dangerous?" Luo Fengxue rubbed her red eyes and nodded. "If it wasn't dangerous, Grandmaster wouldn't have let Martial Uncle Shoujing go. I hope Martial Uncle Shoujing and Martial Uncle Qingyuan can come back safely." "What are you thinking about?" Mo Tiange thought for a while then answered, "I'm thinking about Senior Martial Sister Wei." Luo Fengxue let out a ha and patted Mo Tiange's shoulder. "Do you think it's amazing that second martial sister is willing to take the risk?" "Not really. But it's indeed very rare. Most cultivators were selfish. Even if it was a famous cultivation group that cultivated one's mind, there weren't many people who were willing to go even though they knew it was dangerous." Luo Fengxue chuckled, patted Mo Tiange's shoulder and said earnestly, "Don't be too easily moved." Second martial sister took the initiative to go because, halfway through her sentence, Luo Fengxue stopped talking and looked around to make sure there was no one around before she continued in a low voice, "Because of Martial Uncle Shoujing." Mo Tiange was confused. Luo Fengxue couldn't help but pat Mo Tiange's head. "Stupid. Just you wait, there must be other female disciples in our Clear Spring Peak who are willing to go." "Huh?" Mo Tiange thought for a while and seemed to understand a little. "You mean, humph." Luo Fengxue rolled her eyes and muttered, "In my opinion, it's their brains that aren't clear. What kind of person is Martial Uncle Shoujing? If their cultivation levels can't catch up, what's the use of thinking about it? The lifespan of us cultivators is far longer than that of mortals. If we don't have the same lifespan, how many years can we stay together?" In the end, Luo Fengxue sighed. Who said the distance between cultivators and mortals was far? It was the same between cultivators. The lifespan of foundation building cultivators and core formation cultivators was at least 300 years apart. Even if they loved each other like honey, they still couldn't love each other to the end. Mo Tiange said strangely, "There are so many core formation cultivators, but why do they only like Martial Uncle Shoujing? We're not mortal women, do you think they only look at appearances?" Luo Fengxue patted Mo Tiange's head again, but this time, she was praising her. "That's right. That's why I said they're not clear. They're walking on the path of cultivation, but they're actually the same as mortal women. However, it's not strange for Martial Uncle Shoujing to be liked. His aptitude is good, his cultivation level is high, he's handsome, and he's very young. None of the foundation building senior martial brothers in our school can compare to him." "Really?" Mo Tiange was curious. "I haven't seen Martial Uncle Shoujing yet. What does he look like?" Luo Fengxue wanted to say something but didn't dare to. She said helplessly, "He looks quite similar to senior martial brother Qin." "Oh, think about it. This year, Martial Uncle Shoujing, and he's only 140 years old. At this age, he's already in the middle stage of the core formation realm. If he's lucky, it's not impossible for him to advance to the nascent soul realm before he's 200 years old. Moreover, Martial Uncle Shoujing has a good temper. Although he doesn't like to talk and is a cultivation maniac, it's precisely because of this that he's likable. Sometimes, women are the same as men. The colder and more arrogant a man is, the more they want to conquer him, isn't that right?" Mo Tiange stared at the sky and thought for a moment before she shook her head. "I don't think so." In other words, this Martial Uncle Shoujing was quite similar to senior martial brother Qin. However, to be honest, if it wasn't because they'd been together for several months, which made her develop a sense of dependence. She wouldn't have thought senior marshal brother Qin was very likable. Most cultivators weren't ugly, and there were also a lot of them who were handsome. Moreover, most of them were cultivation maniacs, so there didn't seem to be anything special about them. Luo Fengxue looked defeated by Mo Tiange. I admit defeat. I don't have that kind of tenacity. Forget it. Mo Tiange smiled, then asked, Senior Marshal Sister Luo, are you saying Senior Marshal Sister Wei likes Marshal Uncle Shoujing? Hee, others don't know, but I do. Luo Fengxue said quite disdainfully, Marshal Uncle Shoujing occasionally comes out to give sermons, and second Marshal Sister always goes. Moreover, you also know that Marshal Uncle Shoujing doesn't have any disciples, so inner disciples like us often get errands and go to Marshal Uncle Shoujing's Immortal's Cave to handle some chores. Senior Marshal Sister Wei goes there every time. Once. Luo Fengxue looked around but didn't see anyone, so she lowered her voice and continued to say. About this matter, I have to tell you about someone first. We used to have a Marshal Uncle Qing Yuan, Grandmaster's second disciple, but he died in an accident. His descendant, one of our senior marshal sisters, was taken to Clear Spring Peak by Grandmaster. This happened more than 100 years ago. At that time, Marshal Uncle Shoujing had just been taken to Mount Taikang by Grandmaster. The two of them were about the same age, so Grandmaster taught them together. As for this senior marshal sister of ours, her aptitude is a bit lacking, but fortunately, with Grandmaster personally teaching her, how bad could she be? Just like Marshal Uncle Shoujing, she also built her foundation at the age of 20. But this senior marshal sister, probably because she grew up with Marshal Uncle Shoujing and because Grandmaster personally taught her, she became complacent and always regarded Marshal Uncle Shoujing as something. Luo Fengxue continued to say, later, when Marshal Uncle Shoujing's cultivation level surpassed this senior marshal sister's, Grandmaster gave him his own Immortal's Cave. After that, he rarely contacted this senior marshal sister. You also know that Marshal Uncle Shoujing is a cultivation maniac. Aside from cultivating, he doesn't like anything else, so this senior marshal sister's wish naturally fell through. However, she has a bad temper and always makes things difficult for the female disciples who work in Marshal Uncle's Immortal's Cave. So senior marshal sister Wei was put in a difficult position? Exactly. Luo Fengxue curled her lips. At that time, second marshal sister was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm while this senior marshal sister was in the middle stage. I don't know why she went crazy, but she actually beat second marshal sister until she suffered internal injuries and vomited blood. Because of this, Grandmaster let that senior marshal sister go outside. Right now, we don't even know which courtyard she's in. Mo Tiange was rendered speechless by this show of jealousy and jealousy. Immortal clans, prestigious cultivation groups. Unexpectedly, they also had this kind of gossip. Don't tell others about this. I'll tell you the details when I have time. I'm exhausted, I'm going to rest first. Chapter 107. Before long, the second batch of demon exterminating disciples set off. Senior Marshal Sister Wei was among them. They set off quietly. When Mo Tiange found out, she only received a sound-transmitting talisman at the entrance of her cave. It was sent by Qin Shi, saying he was also on the list of the second batch of disciples, but time was tight, so he couldn't say goodbye to her. Mo Tiange only stared blankly for a moment before continuing to cultivate and concoct medicinal pills as usual. She couldn't meddle in these things, but she had to be prepared in case she was sent out of the sect during the fierce battle. A large cultivation group like Enchanting School had about 500 foundation building cultivators, but they sent out more than 200 in these two consecutive battles, which accounted for half of the total number of disciples. According to the news they received last time, the casualties of the first batch of disciples were about 30 to 40 people. For a medium-sized cultivation group, the loss of 30 to 40 foundation building cultivators was an immeasurable loss. Even a large cultivation group like Enchanting School couldn't underestimate it. Moreover, the battle had just started and was fierce. After this demonic beast riot, Xianqing School would probably lose at least 100 foundation building cultivators, which was enough to wipe out a medium-sized cultivation group. In that case, only a few foundation building cultivators in the school would be able to escape this disaster. Therefore, she had to be prepared in case she was sent out to participate in the battle without any means to protect herself. Time passed day by day. A tense atmosphere gradually filled the entire Xianqing school. Mo Tiange learned from Luo Fengxue that the whole of Kunwu was involved in the demonic beast riot. If Xianqing School hadn't issued a mountain sealing order and activated the Great Mountain Protecting Formation at the beginning, all the aura refining disciples would have been killed. Although there were many casualties among the foundation building disciples, the aura refining disciples weren't affected. Therefore, even if Xianqing School suffered heavy losses, it could recover in 100 or 200 years, and the school's strength wouldn't decline. After learning about this, Mo Tiange couldn't help but sigh. The head Grand Supreme Elder, Lord Daoist Jinyang, was able to predict the direction of the situation at the beginning and avoid losses. Otherwise, Xianqing School wouldn't have been able to escape this disaster. Luo Fengxue wasn't busy these days. Reportedly, because this matter was of great importance, the core formation elders of the school head's generation had taken over all these matters. Right now, the foundation building deacons only needed to pay attention to it from time to time. When she was free, Luo Fengxue came to chat with her every day. Although Mo Tiange was anxious to cultivate the soul refining art, she also knew this matter couldn't be rushed. Every day, she just cultivated step by step and chatted with Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue was actually busy for nothing. Her aptitude was good, but she wasn't too keen on cultivating. Instead, she liked to deal with miscellaneous matters. There was almost nothing in the entire Clear Spring Peak that she didn't know. She even knew a lot of gossip about the other peaks. Mo Tiange had never come into contact with people like her. However, such a lively scene reminded her of Muron Yen. Mo Tiange wondered whether Muron Yen had built her foundation or not. Hey, Tiange, why are you in a daze again? Mo Tiange regained her train of thought and shook her head. It's nothing. I was just thinking. Senior Marshal Sister Luo, you've been really free lately. I kind of miss the times when you were busy. Artist Luo. She said, out, and said, Mo, she, Mo, Luo, and, she, he, and. Luo Fengxue glared at her and said, if eldest Marshal Sister wasn't here, I wouldn't bother you. Right now, only the two of us live here. If I didn't talk to you, would I talk to the spiritual beast? Luo Fengxue glanced at her and remembered something. By the way, how old are you, Tiange? Mo Tiange thought about it and sighed. 24. In the blink of an eye, it's been almost 4 years since I came to Xianqing School. These past 4 years had been too smooth for her, so she felt time passed quickly. Oh, if I remember correctly, you're 1 year younger than me. Are you practicing a youthful cultivation technique? You look the same as when you first came. I think so. Luo Fengxue shouted, you really don't know how lucky you are. A youthful cultivation technique. We female cultivators mostly cultivate to stay young. With a suitable youthful cultivation technique, we can save a lot of look-preserving pills. Many people are envious of us, but you're actually saying I think so. Mo Tiange felt a bit guilty. She got her cultivation technique too easily, so she didn't cherish it. You. Luo Fengxue shook her head and sighed. You're smart, but you're slow. You're stupid, but you're very good at controlling your limits. I can't even tell what kind of person you are. Mo Tiange was very curious. Senior Marshal Sister Luo, how many kinds of people do you classify? Luo Fengxue thought for a while then said, it's actually quite simple. Look at the 2 senior marshal sisters living here and me. We each have one kind of person. Eldest marshal sister is the most likable kind. She's considerate like a woman and has the spirit of loyalty like a man. Second martial sister is the kind that's neither likable nor hateful. She's too lazy to pay attention to other people and doesn't look for trouble. As for me, I'm the kind that most people like but a few don't. You see, I'm very popular. Among the disciples of Clear Spring Peak, I dare say I know the most people. Luo Fengxue praised herself for a while then said, there's also the kind that most people dislike. They're the kind that doesn't have a good character but isn't narrow-minded. The last kind is the kind that's completely hated by others. The representative is our senior martial sister who was sent out of Mount Taikong. She doesn't have any self-awareness and only has herself in her heart. She thinks everyone has to revolve around her. Almost everyone hates this kind of person. Upon hearing Luo Fengxue talking about this gossip, Mo Tiange asked, could it be that this senior martial sister has no likability at all? Now that you've asked, I really can't remember. It happened a long time ago. At that time, I think I was only 11 or 12 years old. I remember it happened not long after Martial Uncle Shoujing returned from Demonic Mountain. At that time, Martial Uncle Shoujing's cultivation level dropped greatly and he barely survived. Second martial sister accepted the task of taking care of Martial Uncle Shoujing's cave while he was in closed-door meditation. Who would have thought that senior martial sister actually hated second martial sister for being able to take care of Martial Uncle Shoujing? She made a big fuss and even attacked second martial sister. Think about it, Martial Uncle Shoujing almost lost his life, but she still cared about being jealous. Naturally, she greatly offended Martial Uncle and Grandmaster. It was because of her father that Grandmaster didn't punish her. He only told her to leave Xianqing School and go to the branch courtyard to reflect on her mistakes for several decades. Alas, in any case, I've never heard of anyone liking her. Oh. This kind of person was indeed unlikable. She didn't even have a sense of propriety. Speaking of eldest martial sister, I wonder how she's doing. I'm not really worried about second martial sister. In any case, Martial Uncle Shoujing is with her. Luo Fengxue looked up at the sky and sighed. There's still no news from senior martial sister Han. There's a bit of news. Luo Fengxue thought for a moment then said, a few days ago, there was news that a secret mark left by senior martial sister was found, but they haven't found her yet. I think it's very likely that senior martial sister is still alive. That's good. No bad news is good news. Luo Fengxue pondered for a moment then clapped her hands and said, you're right. That's exactly what you said. The two of them chatted for a while when they suddenly received a summoning talisman at the same time. Oh. It's Master's. Mo Tiange nodded. Mine too. It seems to be the same thing. Let's go. The two of them finished their chores and rushed to Master Daoist Xuanin's cave together. Master. Martial Uncle. This time, Master Daoist Xuanin wasn't meditating. Instead, he was walking in circles in the hall with his hands behind his back. When he saw them coming in, he stopped and said, good, you're all here. Come here. He turned around and sat down on the main seat. He looked at his disciples with a solemn expression and said in a heavy voice, I called you here because the battle is fierce. Maybe you'll be sent to join the battle in the next moment. Mo Tiange was shocked. She glanced at Luo Fengxue, and both of them looked bewildered. Xianqing School had sent more than 12 core formation cultivators. Even if Martial Uncle Hanyu died, there were still 11 core formation cultivators left. Xianqing School only had a little more than 40 core formation cultivators in total. They'd already sent a quarter of them, but they still couldn't hold on. Could it be that one of the martial uncles also died? Master, eldest martial sister, second martial sister, Master Daoist Xuanin shook his head. Qingyu has been found, so he's fine. However, with the current situation, it's hard to say whether they can come back or not. I've decided to leave the mountain to provide reinforcements. Among you, those in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and above, follow me into battle. All the disciples were startled, but no one dared to object. Those in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and above all answered in a low voice, "Yes, Master." As for you two. Master Daoist Xianin looked at Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue. You two in the early stage of the foundation building realm also mustn't relax. I reckon that before long, you'll also have to leave the mountain to participate in the demon exterminating battle. Therefore, I'll give you some magic tools and talismans first. Take them with you. Yes, Master. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other, then each took the magic tools and talismans from Master Daoist Xianin. After listening to his admonishment for a while, they finally left Master Daoist Xuanin's cave. The two of them walked in silence for a while. Finally, Mo Tiange said hesitantly, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, do you have any way to inquire about the specific situation?" Luo Fengxue asked absent-mindedly, "What kind of information do you want to inquire about?" "One of them is Big Brother Yi, whom you also know. The other one is Senior Martial Brother Qin. Last time, Senior Martial Brother Qin said he also wanted to go to battle, but I haven't heard any news from him." Luo Fengxue said, "Your Senior Martial Brother Qin will definitely be fine, but it's hard to say for Senior Martial Brother Yi. Rest assured, I'll go to the Steward's Hall and ask the other Senior Martial brothers and sisters." "How can you be so sure?" "Of course." Luo Fengxue's eyes shifted. Senior Martial Brother Qin's identity is special. He definitely won't be allowed to participate in dangerous matters. Besides, there's also Martial Uncle Shoujing. That's true. That being said, Mo Tiange still felt uneasy. In any case, Yi Jingwen advanced into the foundation building realm many years ago and was now in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Qin Shi, on the other hand, advanced only a few years ago. Most likely, his realm hadn't even stabilized yet, let alone his divine abilities. Even if he had a lot of treasures on him, without a cultivation level, it would all be in vain. However, she didn't have to worry for long, because not long after Martial Uncle Xianin left the mountain, she received a notice to leave the mountain with Luo Fengxue to provide support. Chapter 108. Mo Tiange frowned as she stared at the billowing smoke and dust below. She had never thought that there would be such a chaotic scene outside. The fleeing crowd was chased by low-level demonic beasts. Those who couldn't escape in time were caught up by the demonic beasts. They were either torn to a bloody pulp or swallowed whole. All of a sudden, she clenched her fists and bit her lips. In the end, she still retained some of her rationality and looked at Master Daoist Sushin. Martial Uncle Sushin? Daoist Master Sushin was a woman with a cold expression. At this moment, she raised her hand and shot a horsetail whisk at the demon beast below. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange and the others attacked one after another. Blood splattered everywhere, and limbs flew everywhere. These were all low-level demonic beasts, and with a few dozen of them taking action, they were immediately cleaned up. Mo Tiange wiped the blood off her hand, then glanced at Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue's complexion was a bit pale. She whispered, "How could this be?" Mo Tiange saw that Luo Yunyang was trembling. She knew Luo Yunyang had been a disciple of a famous cultivation group since she was a child and had never experienced such a bloody scene. Mo Tiange held Luo Yunyang's hand and said, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, let's just kill the demonic beast." Luo Fengxue finally regained her composure after a long time. She shook her head and said, "Don't worry, I can adapt." He then smiled bitterly. In fact, our Xianqing school has always been prepared for danger in times of peace. Most of our disciples have experienced fighting. It's just that I like doing chores, so I never thought there'd be a day when I'd need to fight by myself. Alas, I've indulged myself too much. Most of these people were mortals who lived in a certain city or a certain clan. Now that they were saved, they all knelt down and kowtowed. There were even some who begged bitterly to be brought to a safe place. Feeling a bit sad, Mo Tiange turned to look at Master Daoist Sushin. Master Daoist Sushin shook her head and said, "We have other important matters to attend to. We can't delay any longer." Mo Tiange knew what Master Daoist Sushin said wasn't false. Their group only had about 20 people in total. If they sent these mortals away and came back later, they wouldn't know how long they'd have to drag things out. The longer they arrived one day later, the more difficult the situation would be. Since it was beyond his power, there was no need to force it. However, someone shouted, "Uncle Master, if we don't do anything, these mortals will probably die." Master Daoist Master Sushin glanced at that person coldly. "Although our Dao school scrupulously abides by the rules, we still need to weigh the consequences. If these mortals leave Kunwu Mountain as soon as possible, they'll be able to keep their lives. Let's go." As he spoke, he controlled his flying magic treasure and instantly left this place. The immortal path was not heartless, but there was a limit to it. Mo Tiange sighed inwardly but didn't say anything. Several days later, they finally arrived at their destination. Mount Taikong had a great mountain-protecting formation. The demonic beasts once suffered losses from this heaven and earth life-killing formation, so they didn't dare to attack directly. Instead, they kept harassing the small cultivation groups and clans attached to Xianqing School in the vicinity of Mount Taikong. It was precisely because of this that Xianqing School couldn't stay out of this matter. Many of the disciples and resources of big cultivation groups came from these cultivation clans and small cultivation groups. Without them, half of Xianqing School's foundation would be ruined. Before she left the mountain, Mo Tiange already knew that the war in West Kunwu was mainly happening at Luoyan Cliff. Most of those cultivation clans and small cultivation groups had also moved there. From afar, everyone could see that there was a large array set up on the cliff. Within the array, there were tents all over the mountain. Master Daoist Sushin looked at this scene with a deep frown on her face. She led them to stop outside the array. A group of patrolling cultivators came over and respectfully saluted them. "May I ask Senior Xianqing School's Daoist name?" Master Daoist Sushin's disciple stepped forward and answered, "My master's Daoist name is Sushin. We came to help under the orders of the sect." "Oh, so it's Master Daoist Sushin. Sorry for not coming out to greet you. I'm Hong Yuan from the Shangqing sect, currently responsible for patrolling Luoyan Cliff. Please show me your sect identity tablet. Please forgive me if I offended you in any way." Hong Yuan was polite, but he didn't forget his duty. Although they were all wearing Xianqing School's uniform, he still remembered to check their identity tablets. Master Daoist Sushin nodded slightly and took out a jade tablet. Hong Yuan personally confirmed it and said respectfully, "Senior, please wait here for a moment. I'll inform Senior Lingxi to open the formation." After obtaining Master Daoist Sushin's permission, Hong Yuan sent a sound-transmitting talisman. Before long, a core formation cultivator wearing Xianqing School's uniform came over with several disciples. He said happily, "Senior Martial Sister Sushin, you're also here." Master Daoist Sushin still looked cold, but her gaze softened a bit. "Junior Martial Brother Lingxi, how's the situation?" Mo Tiange hadn't seen this Master Daoist Lingxi before, but he still looked young, so he must be a talented person. Master Daoist Lingxi said, "Senior Martial Sister, please come in first. We'll talk about the details later." He then led everyone into the formation. The disciples behind him arranged for the foundation building cultivators while he welcomed Master Daoist Sushin into the big tent. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue listened to their respective arrangements, but Master Daoist Sushin was stunned when she entered the tent. There were more than 20 cultivators sitting inside the tent, all of whom were in the core formation realm. Most of them belonged to Xianqing School, but there were also some cultivators from small cultivation groups attached to Xianqing School. This was probably the majority of Xianqing School's cultivators participating in the battle. Why did they gather here? Junior Martial Sister Sushin, you're also here. Master Daoist Xianin sighed when he saw her. Including Sushin, Clear Spring Peak had a total of 7 core formation cultivators. 4 of them were already here, and the number of cultivators from the other peaks was also about the same. Thus, half of Xianqing School's core formation cultivators were already involved in this demonic beast riot. After greeting everyone, Master Daoist Sushin went to sit next to Master Daoist Xianin. Senior Martial Brother Xianin, how's the situation now? Master Daoist Xianin shook his head. Several core formation cultivators died several days ago. What? Master Daoist Sushin frowned and glanced around. 7 or 8 core formation cultivators from Xianqing School weren't here. What about Junior Martial Brother Qingyuan and Junior Martial Brother Shoujing? Master Daoist Xianin said, Junior Martial Brother Qingyuan went out to carry out a mission. Junior Martial Brother Shoujing, he paused. Master Daoist Sushin anxiously asked, what's wrong? Junior Martial Brother Shoujing is missing. Master Daoist Xianin furrowed his brows. During the battle a few days ago, Junior Martial Brother Shoujing fought against a 7th rank Radiant Beast. Since then, we haven't been able to contact him. There are also other core formation cultivators, but some of them are missing. We're currently discussing this matter. Missing. Master Daoist Sushin shook her head and said calmly, although a 7th rank Radiant Beast is equivalent to a late-stage core formation cultivator, Junior Martial Brother Shoujing has always been quick-witted and has magic weapons to escape, so his life shouldn't be in danger. I'm afraid he's injured and is hiding somewhere to recuperate. That's what I think too. Master Daoist Xianin nodded, but the worry on his face didn't diminish. It's just that the current battle situation is really bad. Junior Martial Brother Shoujing is still outside, so I'm still worried. Master Daoist Sushin nodded. After a while, she asked, Senior Martial Brother Xianin, how strong are the opponents? We have so many core formation cultivators, but we actually can't gain the upper hand? Master Daoist Xianin smiled bitterly. The opponents have 5 or 6 7th rank demonic beasts, plus more than a dozen 6th and 5th rank demonic beasts. They outnumber us, and their cultivation levels are also slightly higher. Although she wasn't very beautiful, she was very likable and always had a smile on her face. Luo Fengxue immediately rushed over and shouted in surprise, eldest martial sister, are you alright? I'm fine. Han Xingyu affectionately patted Luo Fengshue's head. She was much older than Luo Fengxue. According to seniority in the secular world, she was old enough to be Luo Fengshue's great-grandmother. She watched Luo Fengxue grow up and treated her like a junior. After comforting Luo Fengxue, Han Xingyu turned around and said to Mo Tiange with a smile, Tiange, I haven't congratulated you on building your foundation. You must be tired from the journey, right? Mo Tiange smiled and said, thank you, Senior Martial Sister Han. It's great that you're alright, we were all very worried. Han Xingyu gracefully smiled and sat down. She then softly reprimanded Luo Fengxue, Fengxue, in the future, you can't say this kind of thing carelessly. There are a lot of people here, who knows who might hear you. Luo Fengxue nodded obediently. I understand, eldest martial sister. Han Xingyu smiled and nodded. She then turned around and said to Mo Tiange, I came to see you and tell you about the current situation. Perhaps you'll soon have to face demonic beasts, so you can be mentally prepared. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.